Let me take you back to the 2010s, those years when pocket computers started changing everything we did, from snapping photos on the go to sharing laughs online. We'll wander through the simple ways folks connected over music apps and family videos, the feel of a fresh DVD rental on a quiet night, and all those little routines that made life hum along without rushing too fast. It's a time I remember with a quiet smile, full of those everyday moments that still warm me up. I remember the day I brought home that first iPhone upgrade back in 2012 like it was just yesterday, when the world started fitting right into the palm of my hand, and everything from checking the weather to reaching out to family shifted into something quicker and closer, without losing that personal touch that made those connections feel real and grounded in the everyday flow of life. The store clerk handed it over in a simple box, and as I peeled back the layers to reveal that sleek black device with its smooth glass face, I could already sense how it was going to weave itself into the routines I had built over the years, turning solitary moments like waiting for the bus or sipping coffee on the porch into opportunities for gentle engagement with the bits of news or notes from loved ones that kept the day feeling connected and alive. Sliding my finger across the screen for the first time brought up a world of icons that promised easy access to maps for finding my way around town, without unfolding a paper chart or asking for directions at every turn, and the clarity of that display made even the smallest text sharp enough to read without straining, pulling me in with a quiet efficiency that respected the pace of someone who had always preferred things straightforward and unhurried. Setting it up took a bit of patience as I synced it with the old computer in the corner of the living room, where photos from family gatherings began transferring over in neat folders that I could thumb through any time the mood struck, each image popping up with a softness that captured the smiles and the warmth of those shared meals around the table without the fuss of digging through shoeboxes stuffed in the attic. The email app loaded up next, and suddenly messages that used to pile up on the landline's answering machine arrived with a soft chime right there in my pocket, allowing me to reply with a few taps that felt natural after a short while, bridging the gap between morning chores and afternoon visits in a way that kept everyone looped in without the need for long-distance calls that ate up minutes and coins. I found myself glancing at it during lunch breaks at the local diner, where the screen's glow reflected the steam from my soup bowl as I scrolled through updates from the kids about their school events or weekend plans, and that little device became a steady companion that lightened the load of remembering birthdays or follow-ups, all while holding on to the essence of those relationships that had always been the heartbeat of my days. As the weeks turned into months, the iPhone's camera lens started capturing slices of life that I might have let slip by unnoticed before, like the way the leaves turned gold along the neighborhood path during that crisp fall walk, or the quick shot of the grandkids piling into the swing set at the park, each photo storing away those fleeting joys in a digital album that I could revisit on rainy evenings when the house felt a touch too quiet. The battery indicator became a familiar sight, hovering around half by midday after a morning of light use, and I'd make it a point to find a spot to recharge during longer outings, perhaps at the library where the outlet by the window let me sit with a book while it powered up, turning what could have been a hassle into a brief pause that encouraged reflection on how far things had come from the bulky pagers of earlier years. Navigation apps guided me through unfamiliar streets when visiting relatives out of town, the calm voice directing turns, with precision that eased the tension of wrong ways and detours, and arriving on time with that sense of confidence made the whole trip feel smoother, like the phone was lending a hand without ever overstepping into the driver's seat. One of the simplest pleasures came from the way it handled music, pulling tracks from my old CD collection into playlists that played through tinny speakers during evening tinkering in the garage, where the rhythm of a familiar tune kept my hands steady on whatever project I had going, blending the new technology with the comforts of what I already knew and loved without forcing any big changes to the solitude I sometimes craved. Calls came through clearer than ever, the voices of far-off family cutting through without static or echoes, and ending a conversation meant just sliding the screen off, leaving a warmth that lingered as I pocketed it and stepped back into the yard to tend the garden rows that had always been my quiet retreat. Over time, updates rolled in that polished the edges, fixing little glitches in the apps or brightening the interface just enough to make daily use feel fresh yet familiar, and I appreciated how it evolved alongside me, respecting the rhythm of a life built on steady habits rather than flashy overhauls that demanded too much attention. There were moments when the screen's constant pull tested my patience, like when notifications buzzed during a peaceful supper and pulled my eyes away from the plate. But learning to silence them for stretches taught me to reclaim those undivided hours, ensuring the device served as a tool rather than a distraction in the gentle unfolding of each day. Friends at the community center shared their own stories of similar upgrades, swapping tips on cases that protected against drops or chargers that held up through travels. And those casual exchanges built a shared understanding that this pocket companion was changing how we all stayed woven into each other's lives, one upgrade at a time. By the end of that first year, the iPhone had settled into my routine like an old pair of boots that fit just right after a few wears, carrying the weight of modern convenience while honoring the simple truths of connection that had always guided me through the years, leaving me with a quiet gratitude for how it opened doors without slamming any shut. I can still picture the early days of getting comfortable with that touchscreen keyboard on the iPhone, how the flat glass surface under my fingertips felt so different from the clunky buttons on the old flip phones, and yet after a few awkward attempts, it started to feel like an extension of my hand, allowing me to tap out messages to the family about picking up bread on the way home, or asking if they needed anything from the store without the interruption of dialing numbers and waiting for rings that sometimes went unanswered in the busier parts of the day. The first texts I sent were simple things, like a quick note to my daughter about the time I'd be over for supper, and watching the words appear letter by letter as I pressed those virtual keys brought a sense of immediacy that made our back and forth feel more like a conversation over the kitchen table rather than something formal and distant, with the phone vibrating softly in my pocket to signal a reply that popped up right away in those neat little bubbles on the screen. It was a small shift, but one that wove into the fabric of my routine, turning moments of downtime, sitting on the bench at the park or waiting for the coffee to brew, into chances to stay connected, where a thumbs-up emoji or a short sentence could convey the warmth of checking in without the need for full explanations every time. Learning the autocorrect feature took some trial and error, as it would sometimes change a word I meant into something off, like turning dinner into diner when I was rushing to confirm plans for a meal at home, and I'd have to backspace and tap again with a chuckle at how the machine tried to guess my thoughts. But over time, it learned my habits and made those corrections less frequent, smoothing out the flow so that sending a reminder about the grandkids' soccer practice became as effortless as jotting it on a notepad by the fridge. The group chat started small, just with immediate family sharing updates on weekend barbecues or holiday shopping lists, and seeing everyone's responses stack up in real time created a shared space that felt inclusive and lively, even if I wasn't the quickest to reply, allowing me to read through at my own pace and add my 2 cents when it fit, like suggesting we bring the old picnic blanket that had seen so many summers. That gentle thread of communication extended to friends from the neighborhood too, where a text about meeting up for coffee at the corner shop replaced the uncertainty of calling and possibly missing each other, and the read receipts let me know when they'd seen it, adding a layer of reassurance that our plans were solid without any extra words. One afternoon, while out running errands in the mild spring weather, I pulled over to text my son about a sale on tools at the hardware store, describing the sturdy hammer that reminded me of the one we'd used together on that backyard shed years back, and his enthusiastic response came through with a photo of his own project, bridging the miles between us in a way that made the drive feel less solitary and more like we were side by side picking out supplies. The predictive text bar at the top of the keyboard anticipated common phrases I used, like "see you soon" or "talk later," saving me a few taps and keeping the exchanges light and unburdened, which was perfect for those evenings when fatigue set in after a day in the garden and I just wanted to wrap up the day's news with a few caring lines before settling into my chair with the paper. It even handled longer messages when needed, like recounting a funny story from the community center about old Mr. Jenkins and his tales of fishing trips, breaking it into parts that sent smoothly without losing the thread, and the replies that followed often built on it with their own memories, turning a simple check-in into a moment of shared laughter that lingered through the screen's glow. As the habit grew, I noticed how it influenced the rhythm of meals and gatherings, where instead of excusing myself to make a call, I could step aside for a minute to text a quick update to someone who couldn't join us, ensuring they felt part of the evening's warmth through descriptions of the roast chicken's aroma or the way the laughter filled the dining room, all captured in plain words that carried the essence without overwhelming detail. The sound of the keyboard clicks, soft and customizable through the settings, became a familiar accompaniment to quiet times alone, like when I sat on the porch swing typing notes to my sister about the blooming roses that echoed the ones from her garden back east, and her heartfelt replies about missing the family plots brought a closeness that softened the distance time and travel had imposed. Even in moments of frustration, such as when fat fingers hit the wrong key and autocorrect led me astray in sending duck instead of luck in a birthday wish, it ended in a light-hearted correction that only strengthened the bond, reminding me that these tools were meant to enhance the human touch rather than replace it, keeping our words genuine and full of the care that had always defined our ties. Over the seasons, that touchscreen evolved with software updates that refined the layout for easier reach with one hand, making it practical for holding a grocery bag in the other while confirming the list with whoever was at home. And the integration with voice-to-text allowed me to dictate thoughts on the go when thumbs grew tired. Though I preferred the deliberate pace of typing to ensure each message carried just the right tone of affection and simplicity. Friends would compare notes at the diner about their own texting mishaps, sharing stories of emoji overuse or the joy of threaded conversations that organized replies neatly. And those talks reinforced how this new way of reaching out was quietly reshaping the undercurrents of daily life, fostering a steadiness in relationships that felt enduring amid the changes. By the time the phone's case showed the wear of constant pocket carry, texting had become a cornerstone of how I navigated the week's ebb and flow, from coordinating carpools for the grandkids' events to sending good-night messages that ended the day on a note of contentment, all through that unassuming glass keyboard that had turned fleeting thoughts into lasting links, holding the family's story together with gentle persistence. Those early days with the smartphone brought their share of little concerns, especially around keeping that battery from running low before the day wrapped up. And I recall how every evening after supper, I'd make my way to the side table by the armchair where the charger waited like an old friend ready to lend a hand, plugging in the phone and settling back to watch the percentage climb slowly from whatever it had dipped to during the hours of checking messages or glancing at the map on a drive to the post office. The screen would show that familiar icon of the cord and the lightning bolt, a quiet signal that relief was coming after a full afternoon where the bar had hovered around 20%, prompting me to turn down the brightness or close out apps that weren't in use just to stretch it a bit further through the evening's routine of calling the grandkids or browsing a few articles on the porch as the sun dipped low. It became a ritual born out of necessity, that moment of connection to the wall outlet ensuring I could wake up to a full charge ready for whatever the morning brought. Whether it was syncing the calendar for family visits or simply having it at hand for a quick weather check before stepping out into the yard, and over time it instilled a gentle discipline in how I paced my use, treating the device with the same care as winding an old pocket watch to keep it ticking steady through the week's comings and goings. Forgetting the charger on longer outings turned into stories I'd share later with a wry smile, like that time I headed out for a day trip to visit cousins upstate, and realized halfway there that the phone was down to 10% with no cord in the glove box, forcing me to nurse it along by switching to airplane mode and relying on the radio for directions while the landscape rolled by in that familiar mix of green fields and quiet roads that had always guided my travels before gadgets came into play. I started keeping a spare in the car's compartment after that, tucked alongside the maps I still carried for backup, and pulling it out at a rest stop to juice up on the dashboard became a welcome break, where I'd stretch my legs and sip from a thermos of coffee, turning what could have been a frustration into a pause that reminded me of the importance of being prepared in ways that went beyond just the digital, weaving preparedness into the fabric of those journeys that connected me to places and people who mattered most. The low battery warnings would chime softly at first, then more insistently as it dipped lower, a nudge that pulled me back from scrolling through family photos or reading replies to texts about the garden's progress, and he'd learned to heed them promptly, finding an outlet at the library or a friend's house where the hum of conversation provided company while the charge built back up. Restoring that sense of security that came from knowing the line to home was always just a tap away. In the quieter evenings at home, when the house settled into its familiar creaks and the light from the lamp cast warm shadows across the room. Plugging in became a signal to unwind, perhaps pairing it with the radio tuned to a soft jazz station that played low while the battery recovered from the day's light demands. And that combination created a peaceful interlude where reflections on the hours past mingled with plans for the next, all grounded in the reliability of having power restored. Before bedtime, friends at the weekly card game would commiserate over similar worries, swapping tales of phones dying mid-conversation or during a recipe lookup at the market. And those shared experiences built a camaraderie around the small challenges of adapting to this new constant companion, where tips on power-saving modes or portable banks exchanged over hands of gin rummy lightened the load and made the learning curve feel less solitary. One particularly memorable instance came during a family picnic when the battery warning flashed just as I was about to snap a group photo by the lake, leading me to ration the remaining juice by turning off notifications until we got back to the car, where the auxiliary outlet brought it back to life amid the laughter and the scent of grilled burgers, preserving not just the charge but the joy of the moment captured in pixels that would later fill the digital album with memories of sun-dappled water and easy smiles. As seasons changed and the phone aged a touch, the battery seemed to hold less over the course of a full day out, dipping faster during colder walks to the store or warmer afternoons spent in the garage, which prompted me to adjust habits like charging midday during lunch or carrying that slim power pack in my jacket pocket for unexpected extensions, turning potential strandings into manageable hiccups that underscored the device's role as a helper rather than a hassle in the steady rhythm of life. It taught a subtle lesson in foresight, much like packing an extra layer for a trip or oiling the hinges before winter set in, where anticipating the drain kept things flowing without interruption. And by sharing those strategies with the younger ones during visits, I passed along not just technical know-how, but a mindset of thoughtful stewardship that applied to more than just electronics, fostering connections through practical wisdom exchanged over cups of tea, even in the rare times when it fully powered down, leaving me to rely on face-to-face talks or the landline's reassuring dial tone. It brought a refreshing return to unmediated presence, reminding me of the enduring value in direct words and glances that no amount of battery life could replicate, though I always felt a quiet relief upon reviving it later, ready to resume the gentle weave of digital threads that complemented the tangible bonds we all held dear. Over the years, those battery rituals evolved with each upgrade, where newer models promised longer endurance that lived up to the claims for the most part, allowing fuller days without the frequent plugs. Yet the habit of checking the status bar lingered as a comforting constant, a small anchor in the shifting landscape of how we stayed linked amid the busyness that crept in. Reflecting on it now, that worry over the power source highlighted the human element behind the technology, the way it mirrored our own need for recharging through rest and routine. And in nurturing it through the day, I found a parallel to tending relationships, ensuring they remained vibrant and responsive without letting them fade into silence, all while appreciating the quiet reliability that made those everyday exchanges possible. It wasn't long before that little lens on the back of the phone became its own kind of memory box, and it still gives me a quiet kind of satisfaction recalling how each day seemed to offer a reason to snap a picture, whether it was something as routine as my morning toast and jam lit up by the window, or something as special as a visit from my old friend Harold, the sort of fellow I might not see more than twice a year, but whose weathered smile belonged in my collection all the same. It started off slow, with a handful of photos here and there, maybe the grandkids out on the lawn wrestling with the dog, or the neat rows of tomatoes lined up in the early summer garden. But soon enough, my camera roll began to look like a patchwork quilt, each square another reminder of just how much living fit into a week or a month when you kept your eyes open for it. There was a gentle realness to those pictures too, since I never aimed for anything fancy or posed, just a quick thumb press to catch things as they happened: a forgotten glove on the porch railing dusted with frost, a bright carton of eggs from the farmer's market, or my shoe print in a puddle after a quick spring rain. What I remember most is how easy it became to go back and relive those little moments once they were there in that never-ending scroll of images. Just a flick with my thumb, and I'd find the afternoon we spent laughing under the picnic table umbrella, or the new paint job on the old truck that took half a day and left speckles on my knuckles for the next week. Some pictures came out clear as glass, and some had that pleasant kind of blur you get from laughing while pressing the button, like the ones during Thanksgiving dinner when we were all reaching across for the mashed potatoes and the faces warped into a kind of joyful kaleidoscope. Every photo, even the ones that missed the mark, settled into its place as proof that these were real days, full of the little flutters and stumbles and quiet wins that made up life as I knew it. More than once, I'd find myself alone of an evening, house quiet around me, and I'd unlock the phone and drift through the past month or two just by looking at what I'd captured. There was a simplicity to it that felt kinder than the old scrapbooks, because there wasn't any work to it, no glue sticks or curled corners, but just a living slideshow of where my feet had taken me and who'd ended up beside me in those hours. When the family gathered, somebody always asked if I'd gotten a picture of this or that. Maybe the first bloom on the peach tree, or the bite marks on the first pie of the year, and I found it reassuring how my phone made it easy to share those bits. Just a simple tap and a story attached. So even the folks who couldn't make it in person got a seat at the table, in a manner of speaking. Sharing photos in the family chat brought its own little pleasures. A blurry shot of the dog caught mid-roll brought a line of good-humored replies, or a picture of a stubborn weed finally conquered in the garden would spark a round of advice or jokes about my green thumb, and each reply added another layer to the story, stitching all of us just a bit closer together no matter how far off someone lived. It struck me sometimes, too, that the pictures didn't just fill up my phone. They started to fill up my memory in a different way, making the months seem fuller, richer, as if I could reach back and live through the tender parts again just by looking. I began to notice more, to look for those moments worth catching, not because I wanted perfection or to show them off to the world, but because they felt worth keeping just for me. The steam of my morning coffee in sunlight, the tilt of the porch chair when I sat down heavy after digging up the flower beds. When the storage warning popped up for the first time, telling me the roll was full and I'd have to clear space or move some off, I laughed and thought it was a fine problem to have. So many slices of real life crowded into those digital shelves that there was hardly room for anything else. Cleaning out the camera roll became a ritual of its own every few months, sitting down with my reading glasses and scrolling through, sometimes pausing to linger over a face or a forgotten lunch on the back step, deciding which ones to keep and which to let go to make space for what was coming next. I'd back them up to a cloud service most of the time, at my daughter's suggestion, but I always kept a few favorites set aside, the kind I'd show at the family barbecue or when someone asked about that year's garden. Even the act of choosing what to keep felt like a kind of gratitude, as if I was thumbing my way through a basket of keepsakes and shaking my head at how lucky I'd been to have so much worth saving. There's comfort now in knowing I can pull up a memory whenever the mood strikes, seeing all those days line up, one after the other, showing me that while the world outside changed quicker with every season, the things that mattered most stayed right there, easy to find, just a swipe or two away. When that first smartphone found its way into my day-to-day, I remember how the App Store felt almost like walking into an endless aisle at a friendly corner shop, shelves stacked high with all sorts of odd little possibilities. It wasn't daunting the way a new technology sometimes could be. Instead, every screen full of icons brought a sense of curiosity and simple wonder, because behind each brightly colored square lay some new way to lighten work or brighten a slow afternoon. In those early months, I found myself exploring the store after supper, the house quiet around me, and each tap opened the door to something practical. A flashlight app for the drawer behind the bed, a calendar that kept birthdays in line so I didn't have to remember them in my head, or a tidy notepad app for jotting down groceries when the pen was nowhere to be found. It was the weather apps that truly caught my imagination at first, letting me check forecasts before grabbing my hat on the way out, with simple sun or rain icons showing me what to expect without any nonsense or chatter. One winter, I installed a free app that measured snowfall with a cheerful meter and sent little reminders about slippery sidewalks, and I soon found myself sharing it in the family group chat, so everyone had a heads up before breakfast. My daughter helped install a map app that guided me around construction detours and made picking up prescriptions far less of a guessing game. And that bit of technology became my quiet companion on country drives, turning wrong turns into short adventures, never fretting as long as the blue dot kept moving in the right direction. Games had their place, too, though I never took to the loud or frantic ones. Instead, I preferred those gentle puzzles with calm colors, the sort you could play for a few minutes over tea and then set aside without fuss. One of them kept track of how many words I could string together each day, and I found it soothed the mind after the noise of errands. Much like working a crossword in the evening helped settle me before bed. My grandson showed me a bird-watching app that let me log the sparrows and robins gathering at the feeder, complete with little songs woven in, and soon enough my afternoons spent on the porch swing became their own kind of adventure, chasing digital badges that meant more as memories than any sort of competition. I got a kick out of searching the store for things I never knew I needed, like a digital magnifier that zoomed in clear on the fine print of bills and letters, saving me trouble and strain with the paper mail, or a step counter that cheerfully tracked my walks to the hardware shop and back, offering a quiet sense of accomplishment even on the days I took the long way home. Once, I discovered an app for recipes that organized the family's favorites with tidy pictures and easy lists, and soon my wife and I found ourselves testing them out together, each dinner in easy step-by-step, rather than poring over old books missing half their pages. There was something genuinely heartening in sharing the discoveries with others, posting links in the family chat or passing them along to friends at the card table, everyone swapping reviews and tips in their own plain way. Even the minor hiccups, the updates that slowed things down for an hour, the occasional confusion over how to set up a password, felt more like quirks of daily life rather than true frustrations, and after a short visit with my son or a friendly clerk at the carrier store, there was always a solution in reach, someone ready to lend a hand without making me feel at a loss. I came to appreciate the variety most of all: budgeting apps for keeping track of spending before a trip to the store, news apps that filtered out the noise and gave me a few headlines with my morning coffee, even simple radio stations that streamed old country tunes just the way I liked them, bringing a flavor of youth back to afternoons spent tending tomatoes or repairing a stubborn garden tap. There was a kind of quiet magic in how all these small digital helpers blended into my routines. Over time, I realized my collection reflected not just needs, but bits of my personality, my fondness for walks, my care for family, my pleasure in a good puzzle, my habit of jotting things down rather than trusting my memory alone. Whenever a grandchild came over, they'd ask what new finds I'd made, and sometimes we'd sit together, scrolling through new releases and laughing at the silly ones while picking out something useful to add to the mix. It became a shared ritual, a meeting of generations through that little screen, each download another stitch in the fabric of our days. As the years passed and the app store grew bigger, my tastes stayed simple. Things that worked, things that served, never anything flashy or burdensome. I'd delete what I didn't end up liking and keep just what felt right, a digital basket of well-chosen tools. To this day, my phone still holds a handful from those years: grandchildren's favorite photo editing apps, the gardening journal with notes on every crop rotation, even a local history app that told stories of places in the county I'd passed 1,000 times before. Each one reminds me not of the technology, but of how I learned and shared, quietly, steadily, letting technology settle into my world with respect for what had come before, always on my terms, always enriching, never overwhelming the small and steady joys at the heart of my life. I remember when Facebook first started appearing in the quiet corners of our daily lives, arriving in a way that was gentle but persistent, a kind of slow ripple moving through family and old friends who'd once only kept in touch with the odd holiday card or a phone call that came twice a year. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it, scrolling past rows and rows of names that had faded into distant memory, faces changed by time, but brought back again in profile pictures that sometimes caught the same old smile or clearing glance, and that brought me a comfort I hadn't expected. Posting a family barbecue photo on Facebook became a bit of a tradition in those days, a small act that let folks from all across the country peek in on a sunny Sunday afternoon, see the plastic tablecloth tugged by the wind, or the grandchildren doubled over with laughter beside a half-folded lawn chair. People say it's easy to lose the thread of a family, but every time I posted one of those regular pictures, it was like tossing a line out into the water to see who might tug back. The likes rolled in, sometimes from cousins out west I hadn't seen since they were teenagers, their names now tied to new spouses or college mascots and lives that had shifted far from the old neighborhood. What surprised me was how simply it worked. Click a button, type a short line about who'd brought the potato salad this time or which corner of the yard we'd claimed for dessert. And there it all was, piled up on my wall, like a living scrapbook. The comments that drifted in weren't fancy either, usually just a "looks good" or "tell your boy I said hi." But every message felt like a small bit of the wider family piecing itself together across the usual distances. And it wasn't just for the big group moments. If one of the family went off on a fishing trip or came back with a new job, it would end up there too, sometimes with a quick snapshot from the driveway or a selfie outside the bait shop, and the thread grew longer as friends of friends chimed in. It made keeping up with folks less of a chore and more of a background hum that threaded through my week, letting news trickle in so gently you hardly noticed its absence until you saw it returned. A new baby, a graduation, a clever home project, all shared out just like passing a photograph around the supper table. I'd spot an old neighbor from the street I grew up on and remember the way her voice sounded coming through the screen door in July, and sometimes she'd leave a note about how the roses by the mailbox still bloomed just the same. Little by little, Facebook wall posts became another way of staying stitched into the quilt of people I care about, day in and day out, without ever needing to make a fuss. No ceremony, no speeches, just small, honest glimpses of life as it moved. An easy way of keeping old ties mended and letting new threads in, all with a single quiet post or a friendly comment passed along the line. It never felt like I was broadcasting to the world. Most times it was just sharing with the same friendly faces I'd known all my life, making the circle whole again, one photo and a sentence at a time. When Instagram made its way into our lives, the change was quieter than you'd expect, almost gentle in how it crept into the slower hours of the afternoon, while folks waited for soup to simmer or for the evening light to settle across the yard. I took to it late, after my daughter showed me how to make an account and set up a simple picture. The garden just after a rain, with water droplets clinging to the tomato vines. Where Facebook felt like a scrapbook you shared with family, Instagram reminded me more of passing around a Polaroid at the table, each photo glowing with its own kind of warmth, little slices of someone's ordinary day dressed up in filters that softened corners and brought out a bit of sunlight, no matter how gray the world outside really was. Scrolling through my feed became something I did in quiet moments, never rushed, just thumbing through snapshots of friends and distant cousins as they lived their lives. Someone's dog sprawled across pillows, a neighbor's grandchild covered in birthday cake, a sunset off the back porch that looked nearly the same as the one outside my own window. Every photo felt honest, not posed, just catching things as they happened and offering a hint of how life was going. The filters added a touch of nostalgia, sometimes bringing back the hazy colors of old prints from the shoebox in my closet, and I found comfort in how each image felt familiar even when the faces were new. I wasn't one for posting much, but when I did, it tended to be little things. The first crocus blooming in March, a good chair in a warm patch of sunlight, or a loaf of bread fresh out the oven on a quiet Sunday. It wasn't about showing off or chasing attention. It felt more like giving a small wave, letting whoever cared know I was still here, still tending my days along much the same as ever. My favorites were always those everyday shots, not just mine but the ones from friends who found beauty in the regular stuff. A line of laundry drying slow in the breeze, a new coat of paint on an old shed, the sparkle of dew on the grass in early morning. The whole thing brought a sense of connection that went beyond simple updates. I'd tap a heart under someone's picture of a steaming mug or a snowy footpath, just to let them know I'd seen it and liked what it showed. Comments were short: "Nice garden," "Looks peaceful," "Reminds me of grandma's," but each one felt personal, and it was easy to see the story building as we all shared bits and pieces of our days. Sometimes old friends from high school found me and sent a note about a memory sparked by a photo, and we'd trade a few lines, catching up in the low-key, unhurried way that feels right with folks you've known half a lifetime. Instagram also had a rhythm to it that suited me. Some evenings I'd scroll through pictures from the year gone by, noticing the changes in the garden from spring to fall, or the way the faces in the family grew and drifted as months passed. It didn't ask much, just a few minutes at a time, but it gave back more than I expected. Sharing pictures made holidays sweeter, with nephews posting photos of dinners in other towns and nieces showing off their first snowmen of the season. It was like holding a thread through the scattered patches of family and friends, seeing how our seasons matched and differed. What I liked most was the plain honesty of it. The way a faded pair of boots or a cracked coffee mug could find their place among all the grand views and fancy meals. In all the scrolling, I found myself feeling less alone, reminded that other folks saw the world a lot like I did and took pleasure in similar things. Even when I put the phone down for the night, those images stayed with me, a patchwork of small joys and daily comforts shared back and forth, weaving together a story that spanned kitchens and porches far beyond my own. It wasn't about keeping up or making a splash. It was just sharing pieces of life the way people always have, quietly and surely, letting the simple things matter. Looking back on those first years with Twitter, it strikes me how different this whole thing felt compared to the longer messages and photos of the other platforms. Twitter was built for quick notes, not long stories or fancy greetings, but just a handful of words at a time, a sort of friendly tap on the shoulder you might give in passing to someone waiting for a bus or lingering at the edge of a picnic. My grandson set me up with an account one winter, showed me how to find the little blue bird and tap out short thoughts about whatever crossed my mind. Sometimes the weather, sometimes a ball game, and sometimes nothing more than a memory that popped up while I trimmed the hedge or fed the cat. It didn't take long before those brief messages became part of my weekly rhythm, a way to join in on conversations that seemed always moving, always changing, no matter what hour I checked. One thing I liked best was how easy it was to keep up with the news, not by hunting through big newspapers, but by seeing what folks I trusted were saying in real time. Local weather warnings, notes about road closures, reminders for turkey raffles at the fire station. Little pieces of news came through my feed like snippets overheard at the barbershop, direct and to the point. If I wanted thoughts on the town council meeting, someone usually had summed it up in a few lines. If there'd been a good sunrise that morning, you could be sure half the folks in town had posted a picture and a cheerful comment before breakfast plates were cleared. It had a lively pace to it, and even though I never tried to keep up with everything, it felt good knowing I could peek in and find something of interest without digging too deep. Those hashtags confused me at first, but my daughter explained they were like little signposts for sorting out ideas. Adding them helped my notes find their way to people who cared about the same things, whether it was local sports scores, tips for growing beans, or old stories of county fairs long gone. Hashtag Friday Funnies would lead me to jokes from friends I'd never met, and hashtag Garden Tips sent back more advice than I could ever use. There was a neighborly feeling to it all, even when the folks posting were far away. The distance didn't seem to matter as much as the rhythm and the common sense of sharing what we loved or needed. Everything moved fast, but the nice thing was that it didn't demand anything from me. I could say a little and then put the phone down, go about my chores and not worry about falling behind. Sometimes I'd tweet about the morning light slanting across the barn or the first frost that nipped at my toes. Friends replied, sometimes with a kind word, sometimes with nothing more than a thumbs up or a memory of their own. And even on the days I didn't check in, the conversation continued just the same, a low hum in the background. It was a gentle way of staying in touch without sending letters or making calls, nothing complicated or overly familiar, just connections renewed in small measure, day after day. I used Twitter to keep up with ball games, too. If a big match was on and I couldn't be near a TV, I'd follow the score as fans posted updates, letting their excitement stand in for my own. When something important happened, folks shared the news quickly. Major goings-on felt closer and more immediate, in a way that called to mind neighbors gathering in the street to talk things over before heading inside for the night. And not every note was serious. Plenty was ordinary, the sort of thing you share because you want to feel a part of something bigger. Of course, not every tweet or reply brought a smile, but most days I saw more kindness than trouble. On holidays, I'd write a simple greeting for anyone passing through, sometimes thanking local veterans on Memorial Day or sharing a photo of the pie cooling by an open window, and those short messages often brought replies from distant relatives or folks new to my feed. Even on days when I didn't feel much like talking, scrolling through others' updates made me feel less alone, reminded me that there were folks out there living their lives in much the same way, full of good humor and steady work, trading small pieces of the day without asking for much in return. As the years turned, I never felt pressured to share too much or to paint my life with big, perfect words. Twitter let me keep my thoughts plain, let me follow the stories that interested me, and set it aside whenever my hands were needed elsewhere. Looking back, I realized it helped carry the best parts of neighborly connection. Away from the porch, a shared drink of water, a bit of advice given without fanfare. Except now the neighborhood stretched wider than I'd ever thought it could, still tied together by small, everyday notes that reminded me how a few words can matter. I never thought I'd have much use for Snapchat when it first started making the rounds among my grandkids. But after enough gentle nudging and a few lessons on how to use those colorful filters, I figured I'd give it a go. It seemed odd at first, sending pictures that would disappear right after being viewed, like notes between school desks that got folded up and tucked away after lunch. But there was something charming in how casual and fleeting it all felt. It didn't take long before daily streaks became part of my routine. Every morning after breakfast, I'd take a quick photo from my kitchen window, sometimes just the old maple stretching itself out in the sun, other times my coffee mug, steam curling in the early light, and send it off to the grandkids with nothing fancy attached, just the picture and an honest good morning. Those streaks worked a kind of magic, bridging the busy days and the scattered lives of younger folks who might not have had the time for long messages or calls. It was easy: snap a photo, maybe add one of those silly hats or mustaches from the filter box, and press send. Most days it would come back with something just as simple: a shot of the school bus rolling in, a half-eaten sandwich at lunch, or the view from a dorm room, cluttered with books and new shoes. With each exchange, the counter ticked up, a small tally quietly tracking how many days we'd kept it going, how many times we'd said hello in the smallest way. It wasn't about the numbers, though, so much as about keeping the habit: a daily handshake, a grin sent across miles, a way of saying, "I'm thinking of you," even when words slipped by. Sometimes I'd get creative, adding a line of text, "First frost today," or "Pie coming out of the oven." But most times it was just a picture, plain and true. When the younger ones replied, I could see their world through small windows: new classroom posters, goofy faces with digital dog ears, a glimpse of their morning walks or library afternoons. It let me follow their seasons as they happened, letting me share mine in return, no matter how separated our days might have been by distance or age. And because the photos faded away after being seen, each one stayed light. No pressure to make it perfect, no weight of saving everything, just a brief moment noticed and then gone. Keeping the streak alive brought a certain satisfaction. Some days, one of us would nearly forget, scrambling after supper to catch the last bit of light for a snap, maybe of the cat curled in an armchair or the remains of a jigsaw on the dining table. A missed day meant starting over, which was never a disappointment, just a gentle reminder that nothing lasts forever and that the real enjoyment comes from the doing, not from the tally. When I'd mention these streaks to friends at the community center, a few would poke fun at me for taking part in a young person's game, but I'd explain it was just another way of keeping the thread strong, of letting the next generation know they're not alone, that someone out there is hoping their day went well, even if it's captured in a blurry photo of morning oatmeal. I began to see the value of Snapchat not only in the connections it kept close, but in the spirit of play it encouraged. Every so often, I'd challenge myself to try the oddest filter, the kind that made my hair stand 10 inches tall or dropped a set of sunglasses onto my nose. And when the replies were laughter and double snaps back, it felt as good as any live joke told across the dinner table. It wasn't about storing up memories. It was about the muscle of everyday attention, the kindness of stopping for a few seconds to notice the color of the sky or the shape of shadows in the living room. Over the months, those daily exchanges began to mean more than I expected. Even on quiet days, sending a snap felt like opening a door, passing along a small bit of my world, while letting the grandkids do the same, no explanations needed. We learned each other's routines: the Saturday market haul, the late-night study sessions, the times when rain kept everyone inside. It made me grateful for the plainness of sharing, for the way new habits can draw you into a simple, steady rhythm with family. The streaks were never about keeping score. They were about keeping close, letting the ordinary sights and sounds of life drift back and forth with ease, proof that a little effort every day can hold people together in ways both old and new, steady as sunrise on a workday morning. The first time I changed my profile picture on one of those social media sites, it felt a bit strange, as if I was choosing a cover for the album of my life. Something simple, nothing staged or flashy, just me on the porch in my favorite checked shirt beside a mug of coffee. Back then, Choosing the right image felt important, not because of pride, but because so many friends and family would see it each time they clicked in. A small signal sent out saying, "This is where I am these days," capturing the ordinary joy of everyday living rather than some grand event. I took my time with it, looking through the camera roll for something genuine, something that would fit on the mantle if printed and framed, and once I shared it, the notes that trickled in were all gentle and warm. Cousins from the old neighborhood saying the porch looked just like the one Grandpa built. Neighbors mentioning how the light catching my face reminded them of pulling up chairs for late afternoon stories. Each change felt like a new chapter, not in the big sense, but in the quiet way photos can mark time. When I swapped the porch picture for one from the lake house, taken with my grandchildren kneeling beside a pile of driftwood, the response felt just as personal. A cousin writing about the last time we all fished together, or a friend from church saying the water in the background made her think of lazy summers on the county pier. Unlike the days of sending snapshots by mail, these changes happened quietly, with well wishes popping up from all corners, some short, some long-winded, but all carrying the kind of affection you miss in busy weeks. For me, updating a profile picture was never about keeping up appearances. It felt more like letting folks know I was still here, weathering each season as it came, taking comfort from the simple scenes life gave me every day. Sometimes I'd use a picture of the garden after the first frost, rose trimmed and waiting for spring, or a shot from the family barbecue, where I stood a little outside the crowd but close enough that you could see the joy in my eyes. Friends would share pictures from their own days, maybe dressed up for a holiday, maybe soaking wet from a surprise thunderstorm, and it made me glad to be part of a circle where nobody needed perfection, just a face to go with the stories we'd swapped over the years. As months went by, the family grew and changed, and so did our photos. I'd see profile pictures swap from graduations to new jobs, or from wedding dances to the first real snowfall, and each one served as its own invitation. Come check in, come remember, come see how life still moves in familiar ways. My daughter showed me how to crop and brighten a photo, to make sure I stood out in the frame, and the grandkids laughed at my early attempts before helping me add a subtle filter to highlight the blue in my shirt or the wide grin I flashed during our last fishing trip. It's good to let them help sometimes, to lean into the fun of picking just the right one without worrying too much about how well it turned out. Changing a profile picture became a little ritual, one I didn't do often, but just enough to feel the sway of time turning beneath my feet. It wasn't about showing off or starting conversations. I preferred pictures that drew in only the kind of folks who cared, welcoming old friends back for a check-in or offering family a peek into weekends spent fixing the fence or tending potatoes. More than anything, those moments gave me a reason to reflect, to choose an image that best fit how life felt at that point, warm and real and quietly steady. When I saw the likes and comments rustle up, I always tried to write back, just a few words, remembering birthdays or swapping recipes, taking the chance to keep those connections gentle and ongoing. There were special times, of course, like a milestone birthday or a reunion, and for those I chose pictures where the smiles were wide and the laughter spilled over, wanting to share the best bits with those who'd carried me through loss and joy alike. The power in the profile picture, at least the way I saw it, was never about catching the perfect angle or chasing trends. It was about putting a piece of the real, soft-edged life out there, letting others see themselves in the crowd and feel welcome in the ordinary beat of my days. Looking back, I realize how much comfort these small changes brought, how a simple photo can shine a light on the way we live and love, keeping old connections thriving with every click and update, with every memory drawn up from the well of long years lived simply and truly. It's hard to explain what a change it was to have nearly all the world's music sitting right there in my pocket, waiting for me to listen any time I pleased, as soon as I got the hang of Spotify. In the old days, building a playlist was something you did with blank cassettes or, later on, a stack of home-burned CDs, the sort that wound up in shoeboxes and glove compartments. Always a few tracks skipped and a few favorites played until the tape went thin. Spotify made all that fuss disappear overnight. Instead of searching for that one lost disc, I just picked up the phone, tapped around a bit, and found a way to gather everything I liked in neat rows and boxes, new songs falling in right beside the old standbys with no trouble at all. The setup itself was simple. I chose my favorites first, The warbling country tunes from my youth, sharp-edged rock ballads that marked certain good years, and the gentle piano music my wife favored on Sunday afternoons. The best part was how easily I could add new songs whenever a mood hit me. Maybe something I'd overheard at the hardware store, or a recommendation from one of my kids. Soon, everything from bluegrass to gospel was set side by side, all arranged in playlists named by feeling or season: morning porch, rainy day soup, family barbecue. Each its own small reflection of what made the hours move differently. No need to wait for the radio to come around to the good stuff. Sharing playlists turned into its own ritual. The grandchildren would send me lists full of pop songs or movie themes, just to see if I would try something outside my usual sphere, and sometimes I did. Listen thoughtfully, sometimes smiling at the noise, sometimes finding a new favorite where I didn't expect it. Likewise, I'd pass along a gospel list or a set of old dance tunes, and they listened in their own quiet way, letting the music bridge the gaps between evenings spent apart. It felt natural that our tastes wouldn't match all the time, but the act of sending something on, a handful of melodies, a clutch of lyrics, was its own kind of conversation, a way of saying, "I'm thinking of you," even when words weren't handy. Spotify wasn't just one big shuffle play either. You could make lists for work or rest, for car rides through green country fields, or for doing laundry while the rain ticked against the windows. I liked the control it gave. Some days called for upbeat marching tunes just to keep me moving, and other days felt right for soft folk guitar and a bit of nostalgia. I'd set the mood before a drive, letting the music help carry me through traffic or long stretches of country road. It's funny now how the right set of songs could smooth rough edges off a tired mood, giving the moment a little lift, easing the burdens of small chores. Most evenings, I settled in my chair with a mug of tea and scrolled through new releases or curated lists, recommended for you, or Throwback Thursday. Not because I was keeping up, but just out of curiosity. It wasn't about chasing trends. Sometimes I'd find an old song I hadn't heard in years, the type that brings back the warmth of childhood kitchens and the slow hum of summer nights. A simple tap brought it home again, easy as pie, no digging required. It's worth saying, too, that Spotify's convenience didn't take away from music's magic. Hearing a tune that meant something, whether alone in the morning or together when family came over, drew out stories and laughter, just as in the days when we'd crowd around the record player or pile into the car for a drive with the radio up loud. The technology was new, but what it made possible was familiar: choosing, remembering, sharing, and letting music mark time. I kept playlists for everything, organized in ways that might look odd to someone else, but made perfect sense to me, by chores, by holidays, by moods that didn't need explaining. There were lists for spring cleaning and lists to accompany grilling on the patio. When friends came over, I'd kick off a playlist called Long Table Supper, filled with songs we all knew and could hum along to, letting the music thread its way through conversation and the clattering of forks and plates. Looking back at those early days with Spotify, it feels clear that music grew easier to touch and share, winding itself into my daily routines more gently and more frequently than before. It wasn't about owning anything or making a fuss each time a song changed. It simply let every hour be a little brighter, a little more personal. The playlists formed a living soundtrack to all those ordinary moments, a warm, easy way for memory and melody to meet. I suppose if you asked most folks who lived through the heyday of iTunes, they'd tell you it was all about picking and choosing, about setting aside favorite songs for keeps the way you might circle special dates on a calendar or tuck away letters and birthday cards in a well-worn drawer. When I think back to those evenings spent scrolling through the iTunes library, I remember a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing each track I bought for $1 or $2 was mine to hang on to, not borrowed or streamed, not subject to vanishing the way a radio station signal could fade just as your favorite tune started. The act of buying songs felt downright personal, a small gift to myself after a long week. I'd thumb through lists, preview a song for a few seconds, and let it settle in before deciding it was worth the space in my digital music box. There was a sense of ceremony in the process. Sometimes I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a fresh cup of coffee, flipping through memories as I clicked from album to album. Most of my choices were familiar: songs from old movies or wedding dances, gospel hymns that settled in soft on Sunday mornings, or the early rock and roll numbers that kept me company while patching fences or tinkering in the garage. I'd buy and download them one by one, watching each track settle into its permanent slot in my library, neat and tidy as books on a shelf. It was different from making mixtapes for friends. Here, I curated for myself, aiming for comfort and reliability, always knowing where to find an old favorite. Sometimes, I'd splurge on a new album that one of the grandkids recommended, just to see what all the fuss was about. Not everything fit my taste, but more often than not, I'd discover a song or two worth saving. A clever line or a gentle melody, something I'd revisit on quiet afternoons or early drives to the grocery. It felt good knowing I could buy just the tracks I wanted, skipping the ones that didn't suit me, and that each purchase carried with it a bit of choice and intention, a small reminder that technology could lend a hand in making life feel more personalized, more fitting to my routine. Transferring the library to different devices became its own little project. The grandkids would lend a hand, teaching me to plug in a phone and sync it up, watching the progress bar fill as my music made the jump from place to place. It made me smile, seeing beloved tracks show up on a new gadget, ready for play at a moment's notice. On family road trips, I'd hand over the device so someone else could pick out songs. It was a good feeling knowing that music could travel with us, that it was ready no matter if the car was full of chatter or if I needed a tune for a solo stretch behind the wheel. Even well after streaming services took over and folks started talking about playlists and recommendations algorithms, I kept my iTunes library alive, stubborn as ever, holding on to those purchased tracks like keys to a favorite cupboard. There was comfort in the routine. Each song still belonged to me and brought its own set of stories. The old swing tune we danced to at my nephew's wedding, the folk ballad that filled the house during the holidays, even the silly novelty number my friends played so many times at card night we nearly wore it out. Sometimes, after a tough day or in the slow moments before bedtime, I'd flip through the library, playing songs I hadn't heard in a while, letting the memories roll out with the notes. A birthday party gone by, a kitchen full of family, a cold winter morning warmed by familiar chords. The purchases themselves stood as markers, each with a date and price, a record of tastes that changed and steadied over the years, always shaped by mood, company, and the passing seasons. Looking back, I realized those last purchases on iTunes held more meaning than I gave them credit for at the time. They gave me a sense of ownership, a say in how my days sounded, and a way to keep portions of life in my pocket, framed by the music that made living sweeter. Even as things moved onward, even as playlists and streaming took the spotlight, I treasure those old digital shelves. The simple act of buying, saving, and playing back what mattered, each song a quiet thread in the fabric of ordinary days well loved and well lived. There was a time, before all the streaming apps settled into their places on my phone, when Pandora was the closest thing I'd ever seen to having a personal DJ right there in the living room, able to pull together song after song built around the mood of a single tune. It was a simple setup. I'd pick a favorite track, maybe an old folk classic or something easy from the Motown years, and with just a click, Pandora would spin out hours of music that felt stitched together like a perfect patchwork, laid out for a slow Sunday or a long drive beneath pale morning skies. Unlike the playlists I curated myself, this was music by serendipity, each selection shaped by those tiny thumbs up or thumbs down buttons, nudging the station closer to something that felt quietly personal, even if you could never quite predict where the next song might take you. The first time I queued up a station, I was taken aback at how well it matched my unspoken mood. A bit of soft guitar, a touch of jazz, then some old country bands singing in harmonies that sounded like cousins gathered around a porch swing. Pandora didn't fuss over genres. It followed the thread of feeling, drawing connections I might not have made on my own, and sometimes landing on a forgotten favorite just when I needed it most. As I listened, I'd tap thumbs up for the ones that spoke to me. Songs that tugged at memories of wedding dances or working in the garden, pieces that reminded me of youth spent wandering dusty county roads or winter nights thick with slow laughter. I liked that I didn't have to micromanage anything. If I was busy folding laundry or slicing apples for pie, the station kept moving along, never asking for more attention than I had to spare, never demanding perfection. It serenaded me through chores and quiet afternoons, letting me drift between melodies, each one a gentle surprise, a soft trickle of music carrying me from one moment to the next. On days when company came by, I'd let Pandora pick the mood, trusting it to serve up a round of easy standards or toe-tapping bluegrass, background enough for any conversation, never overpowering. There was beauty in handing over the reins to the algorithm, seeing what came back based on the heart of a single tune. That sense of discovery meant even more when I started hunting for new music. I would choose a familiar starting point, a song from the first dance with my wife, or an old gospel number played at church, and watch as new artists appeared, some with names I'd never heard and voices that caught me by surprise. It kept things lively, and more than once, I'd jot down the name of a band or sing along to a chorus I'd never known, passing on recommendations to family when supper rolled around, letting the sound of the day spill gently into the evening's quiet. It made the world seem smaller, friendlier, joined by tunes that felt as much mine as anyone's. The thumbs down sometimes came into play too, when songs just didn't fit, but even that small act felt part of the process, a bit of self-direction in an otherwise hands-off world. Over weeks and months, my stations grew more tailored, a subtle reflection of the shape of my seasons and the bend of my moods. I'd notice how the mix shifted from bright and energetic during spring planting, to slow and thoughtful in the thick heat of August, to the kind of comforting warmth that carried me through fall's early darkness. The radio didn't just play songs. It set the tone, laid out a gentle rhythm beneath the shuffle and hum of daily tasks. Sometimes, at family gatherings, someone would ask what station I was playing, and I'd see the surprise in their eyes when I explained how a simple thumbs up here and there shaped the whole night's soundtrack. It was a pleasure sharing how easy it all was. No stacks of CDs, no fussing with wires and discs, just an app doing its best to keep pace with the flow of living. Looking back, I realized those hours spent drifting through Pandora's selections weren't about chasing the latest hits or filling every silence. They were about finding simple comfort in the way music floats through a space, linking together days, drawing people close, and letting every song, known or new, become a small part of the story you're always living. If you had told me back when I was a boy that someday you could carry thousands of songs in your pocket and play them through tiny speakers in your ears while strolling down the old gravel path behind the house, I would have laughed and asked how that trick was done. But those first years with headphones and a phone changed the shape of my walks in a quiet, steady way. I'd slip the buds in after breakfast, step out onto the porch, and let a favorite album guide me through dew-damp grass and the slow unfolding of the neighborhood. Morning light, birds calling in steady patterns, and a private world of music all to myself. It felt like two comforts folded together, the reliable outdoors and the new convenience of technology. Having headphones meant I could tune out distractions when I wanted peace, but also bring a touch of company to the slow hours spent on errands or walks for my health. Used to be, I'd listen for the sounds of the world, rusty hinges on the garden gate, the far-off rumble of a pickup on the back road, wind tracing its way through poplar leaves. But with music in my ears, everything seemed to move with a calmer rhythm. I liked to pick songs that matched the pace of my steps, something gentle if the day called for reflection, something lively if my knees felt particularly spry. The phone's battery usually lasted just enough for me to finish a loop around the block or drop off the mail, the music quieting as I came back home for a midday rest. It took a while to get used to the extra cord dangling from my pocket and the adjustments required to keep the headphones comfortably seated. But once I got the hang of it, the habit felt natural, a new layer woven into routines I'd held for decades. Sometimes, after a long week, I'd choose old jazz for a mellow feel, letting saxophones and pianos carry me past hedges and neighbors' flower beds. Other times, I'd put on country tunes for the memories they held, images of barn dances and late-night suppers, shouts of laughter under a summer moon, music that helped me feel those times again, even as I walked in quiet solitude. Wearing headphones through grocery stores or hardware shops meant I could keep the world's noise at bay when I preferred my own soundtrack. Once in a while, I'd get tapped on the shoulder by someone waving for a hello, and I'd pause the music, happy to swap a few words about the butcher's new batch of smoked ham or the price of garden hoses this spring. The headphones were never a barrier, more a way to make each outing just a little bit mine. On chilly mornings, the music seemed to give my steps a kind of energy, pushing me past a reluctance to leave the warmth of the house, and on long afternoons, it made chores move by more quickly, a soundtrack to sweeping, raking, and running short errands. Even at family get-togethers, headphones found a place. Sometimes, if the house was crowded and noisy, I'd slip away to the back porch, press play, and steal a few minutes for myself. The music softened the edges of busy days, let me clear my head before heading back into conversation. Grandchildren would sometimes ask about what I was listening to, and if the mood was right, I'd unplug an earbud, hand it over, and let them hear the music I'd cherished for decades. It made for good talks, opening the door to sharing stories about the meaning behind each song. The cookouts, the old road trips, or the reasons a certain artist always made me think of loved ones gone, but not forgotten. Having music with me on walks or errands changed how I saw the familiar. A favorite tune could turn houses and gardens into places layered with old memories, while new releases from the grandchildren's playlists helped me feel in step with their lives, even as decades stretched between us. The weather didn't matter so much, and quiet days didn't feel lonely with a little melody riding along. The best part was never feeling rushed. If my feet were slow, the music adapted, always waiting for me to keep up. These headphone walks became a kind of anchor for me, steadying my routines and giving each day a soundtrack, a private chorus humming beneath the shuffle and sigh of simple living. It's funny to think how something so new could feel so right, wrapping my old habits in a gentle, musical comfort, reminding me that life moves at your own pace, and sometimes all it takes is a good song and a quiet road to make the hours bright and worth remembering. Concerts have always held a certain magic for me, the sense of stepping out of the ordinary, gathering with a crowd to lose yourself in familiar tunes, and feeling the thump of bass and harmony in your chest. As online apps and ticket alerts became the norm, I found myself welcoming how easy and thoughtful the whole process had gotten, compared to the days of queuing up outside the box office or hoping someone had a spare ticket before showtime. It wasn't just about speed. It was about feeling connected and confident that I could catch a favorite act with family or friends, no matter how busy the days grew. Those alerts would pop up on my phone, simple and clear. Your favorite artist is performing downtown, or tickets for the Saturday show go on sale at noon. More than once the notifications saved me from missing a chance to treat my wife to a night out, or to gather the grandkids for their first real concert. One of those sprawling outdoor festivals where you stood in line for lemonade and waded through blankets scattered on the grass. With the tap of a finger, I could check seat maps, compare prices, and read up on guest performers, all without losing patience or making rushed decisions. It took some getting used to, logging into yet another account, scrolling through terms and sale dates. But after a few tries, it became second nature, just another way technology made life simpler. Buying tickets online let me plan ahead, make sure our schedule was clear, and send the invites out early. If plans changed, I could swap seats or resell tickets straight from the app, a far cry from calling around town searching for someone willing to take them off my hands. Everything was organized, even down to the digital tickets that arrived on my phone. No more crumpled stubs, no more last-minute scrambles. Sometimes I'd print the passes just for old time's sake, slipping them into my shirt pocket and feeling the same thrill I had back in the 70s heading off to see a big band in the city. Seeing loved ones at concerts took on a new rhythm too. With real-time alerts, I could forward the announcements to family, start group chats about which acts to catch, and settle on carpool plans well before the first guitar chord sounded. The grandkids would send links to bands I'd never heard, gently nudging me outside my usual selection, and sometimes I'd do the same, sharing news about a folk legend or a reunion tour. We'd chat over supper about who was playing and where, comparing stories from past shows and marking the calendar for new adventures. The apps often came with perks, early access to tickets, reminders about favorite venues, and updates on changes to showtimes. Instead of worrying about missing out, I felt reassured that the music would find us, that the process of gathering together remained as joyful and straightforward as ever. It wasn't all about big stages either. Alerts helped me find church concerts, local bar performances, and open mic nights I might have otherwise missed. The technology wasn't flashy, just helpful, allowing me to make ordinary evenings special with a bit of planning and anticipation. When the concert day arrived, we'd pile into the car, excited chatter mixing with anticipation, knowing we wouldn't have to fret over forgotten tickets or long waits outside. At the venue, scanning a barcode felt so different from tearing off half a stub, but the feeling of joining a crowd, all of us humming and swaying to the music, remained the same. It was comforting, familiar, proof that even with new digital tools, the essence of sharing music and making memories didn't change. Over time, concert tickets became more than just access to music. They were anchors for the seasons, reminders to pause and celebrate, invitations to reconnect. I still tape some to the fridge or tuck them beside photographs, because each show holds a story. The way my wife smiled as our favorite song played, the grandkids singing along under the stars, and everyone drifting home with ears ringing and hearts a bit lighter. Those ticket alerts brought old joys into the present, letting music fill our lives just as it always had, steady and sure, one show at a time. When folks first started talking about binge watching, I didn't quite know what they meant, because for most of my life, television came one episode at a time, each week bringing you back to the same couch and the same channel for a familiar slice of story. But once Netflix became a regular part of our evenings, things changed in a way that was both gentle and satisfying. It was no longer about waiting, sitting through commercials, marking calendars, or hoping you didn't miss a twist, but about settling in after supper, picking a show with the family, and letting the story carry you through a quiet night together. No interruptions, no rush. Our favorite series became a kind of event, the living room bathed in soft lamplight, snacks piled on the coffee table, everyone shifting for the best view. The beauty of Netflix was in how it offered everything at once. A whole season waiting to be watched, each episode rolling right into the next if you let it. There were times when we'd say, just one more, until bedtime drifted closer than planned. It wasn't about gluttony or escaping. It was about being swept up, about sharing laughs and mutters, talking over the plot without worrying about what we might miss. It was a way of being together, making old chairs feel new with the company of loved ones and the voices on the screen. Sometimes, after supper, I'd settle in on my own, choosing something I remembered from years back, a drama about small towns and second chances, or a sitcom that felt like those old Thursday night favorites. Being able to pick an episode from any season was a kind of quiet luxury, a way of revisiting moments I might have missed or stories I'd forgotten, weaving them into evenings spent resting tired feet. I'd pause when I wanted, stretch, or refill my mug, never missing a beat, never pressed for time. It was comfort, it was ease, it was exactly what the days sometimes needed to unwind. For the grandkids, binge nights meant something else. They'd steer us toward new shows, bright cartoons, clever mysteries, tales as fast and spinning as a summer bicycle ride down the lane. We learned the rhythm together, watching episodes back to back, their quick chatter filling the room between plays. It became a ritual, Friday evenings spent picking a new favorite, everyone perched and attentive. Netflix kept things spontaneous. There was always some novel treasure to discover, always the chance for a surprise plot twist or a fresh joke. What I noticed was that the hours didn't just slip away, they stacked up into memories. We'd laugh at small blunders on the screen or debate a character's next move, and those talks trickled into everyday life, returning during chores or around the supper table. I started to appreciate how the absence of commercials and rigid TV schedules made space for more of the things that mattered. Conversation, sharing, and the presence of others feeling just as invested in the outcome as I was. When I watched Solo, I found myself sending a text to family about an episode's ending, keeping the thread of connection alive even in the quiet. Netflix wasn't only about escapism, it was about anchoring the evenings, giving shape to weeks when work or errands stretched longer than expected. It encouraged small gatherings, let us linger together over comedy or drama, and made winter nights feel warmer and less lonely. And on days when the house was empty and the sky was gray, it offered enough distraction to ease a tired mind, a gentle way of changing pace without fuss. It became a comfort to know that stories were there when I wanted them, ready to unfold whenever the moment felt right. And more than anything, binge nights helped me see that some changes in the world can fit into the oldest rhythms of family and home, letting technology settle in as quietly and naturally as turning on a lamp at dusk. There was no pressure to finish, no reason to hurry, just the joy of watching, together or alone, at our own speed, making an ordinary evening a little brighter, a little more memorable. The last days of Blockbuster come back to me now with a kind of slow fondness. The memory colored by blue and yellow plastic signs, rows of DVDs neatly lined up on shelves, and the soft jingling bell above the door when you stepped in from a brisk evening or a muggy summer night. Long before streaming made movies something you could pick out by scrolling with a thumb, there was a comfort in driving over to the local store, either alone on a lazy afternoon or with the whole family bustling and arguing over what to pick. There was a small promise waiting every time you pushed open those glass doors, a chance to stumble across something new, to catch a favorite you'd watched a dozen times, or to take a quiet risk on a film nobody had heard of yet. Inside, the fluorescent lights shone on box covers lined up like parade banners, each promising adventure, laughter, or a good scare. The new releases stood shoulder to shoulder, and there was always a crowd by those shelves on Friday nights. The familiar shuffle of shoes and low voices, parents reading blurbs to little ones, teenagers huddled together, and college kids hunting for discounted classics. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I'd find just the right DVD. Maybe the last copy of a comedy the grandkids loved, or a gentle drama for a rainy Sunday. Sometimes all the best picks were already gone, but that was just part of things. You learned to grab something unexpected, trusting the staff's handwritten suggestions or a faded memory from years back. Checking out was its own simple pleasure, the act of scanning barcodes and hearing each beep, the clerks slipping discs into their snug plastic cases. There was an unspoken understanding between everyone in line. Nobody rushing, nobody angry, just an easy sort of patience as folks shared recommendations and made the most of a few spare minutes chatting with neighbors. It wasn't just about the films, really. It was about belonging, about how these regular visits threaded people together in the small rituals of their towns and neighborhoods. At home, movie nights meant popcorn hot from the stove and blankets dragged off beds, the whir of the DVD player as it settled the disc in place. The starting menu always held a hint of anticipation, a moment to fill drinks and settle arguments before pressing play. Watching with the family crowded close, everyone reacting to the same joke or gasp, was a treasure that never really gets copied by streaming. Even now, when the movies arrive in a blink and nobody has to leave the house to start one. There was something about the trip, about the drive home as snow began to fall or rain tapped softly on the roof, that made each rental more of an event, more memorable than just a quick scroll and a press of a button. Returning the movies had its own routine, a quiet Sunday morning errand or a late-night dash when the due date slipped up on us. I'd pull up curbside, sometimes sending one of the grandkids in to drop off the movies and maybe sneak a peek at next week's releases. More than once, a film was overdue, but the late fee was just another gentle nudge, a reminder to savor your pick before someone else got the chance. Sometimes the clerks would joke with me, offering a discount on candy or reminding me to bring my points card, and these small exchanges stitched together the weeks, tying each movie night to the next. When Blockbuster announced its closing, the feeling in town was mixed, regret for the old ways, gratitude for all the movie nights spent together, and a little excitement for what lay ahead. I remember stopping in for clearance sales, seeing the shelves emptying out, neighbors trading stories about their favorite finds over the years. The staff handed out the last DVDs with a smile and a word of thanks, handing over not just plastic cases but the gentle weight of memory, all those weekends and holidays spent sharing stories on the couch. Now, each time I scroll for a film or pick a quick watch from an endless digital pile, I sometimes miss the slowness of those Blockbuster nights, the drive, the searching, the sense of community that grew up around picking out something to share. There was nothing fancy about it, nothing speedy or high-tech, but it gave weight to the ordinary joy of sitting down together, watching as the living room filled with laughter, suspense, or song, the film always brighter for the wait. Before live streaming came along, television was a matter of turning the dial and hoping the signal came in clear, but the first times I settled down with Hulu's live channels brought a new feeling, a way to catch the news, sports, or favorite shows in real time without fussing with antennas or wrestling with tangled cords behind the cabinet. It wasn't that far removed from the old days, honestly. The gentle push of a button still called up the evening's entertainment, but everything was smoother, tidier, and quietly convenient. I'd prop my tablet or phone on the edge of the kitchen table, the screen bright and sound crisp, and with just a swipe, I could move from morning headlines to midday ball games to evening sitcoms, all in the comfort of whichever chair I happened to favor. The first thing I noticed about Hulu was how it brought familiar channels home without the weight of a cable bill or the headache of missed episodes. I could tune in as the local news started, listening while fixing supper, and not worry about hurrying to catch a favorite segment. When weather rolled in or a close game went into overtime, Hulu stayed steady. No fuzzy signal, no missed plays, just clear coverage. It made following my hometown teams feel more personal. I found myself texting friends about a goal or a call, knowing we all watched together even if we were miles apart. There were advertisements, same as always, but skipping back or pausing was possible now. So no more frantic dashes to the kitchen before your show started again. With live channels, I could keep up with tradition, Sunday evening movies, Friday night detective shows, or even the annual parades, without needing to remember dates or shuffle through TV guides. Sitting on the porch swing, I watched summer ball games as dusk settled in, sharing the experience with family on holidays or lonely afternoons, and those moments had all the feeling of broadcast TV, just dressed up in something easier. What stood out most was the way Hulu let the television fit my days, not the other way around. Some mornings, I watched cartoons with my youngest grandchild, letting them pick what looked good, while the rest of us prepared for work or school. Evening news turned into a quieter routine. Me on the armchair, the device balancing, updates flowing in without static or delay. The interface was new but not complicated, and once I learned my way around, switching between channels became second nature. Family visits meant gathering in the living room, choosing what to watch together, everyone chiming in until a decision was made. There were accidental discoveries, too. Documentaries I hadn't planned on, cooking competitions that made supper more fun, and offbeat series that caught me by surprise. Sometimes the best nights started without a plan, letting Hulu's guide suggest something fitting to the weather, the mood, or the crowd. The selection of channels wasn't endless, but there was enough that I never felt bored, never felt as if the world moved too fast for me to keep up. One of my favorite new habits was catching up on old shows I'd missed in the bustle of work and raising a family, watching them live as if time had circled back. Sports fans in the family dropped by for playoffs and finals, the energy in the room buzzing despite the fact that we were all gathered around a screen rather than a stadium seat or crowded bar. We celebrated victories, lamented losses, and kept the tradition of cheering and groaning alive, all with Hulu working quietly in the background. At the end of those evenings, closing the app felt less like turning off the TV and more like dimming the lights. A gentle pause until the next day's broadcasts arrived. Hulu kept us part of the wider world, letting news, laughter, and stories flow into our home with little effort, making it easier for family to stay connected and for friends to drop in, picking up longtime habits with new tools. The heart of live TV was always about being together, feeling the pulse of the day and the comfort of shared experience. And with Hulu's channels, it stayed just as true, no matter how the world changed outside the window. There was a time, not so long ago, when having your own home theater meant two speakers on opposite sides of the room and maybe a television so heavy it took two people just to nudge it into a corner. But the 2010s brought a quiet revolution to our living rooms, changing movie nights from something modest to something that felt almost cinematic, sounds swirling all around, colors sharp enough to make the smallest details stand out, and every seat in the house suddenly the best view in town. I remember the first time we upgraded, swapping the old box television for a flat screen, and wiring up speakers in just the right spots, my son crawling behind the sofa with a flashlight and more patience than I thought possible, the grandkids plugging things in and running wires while I read out bits of the directions. There was pride in it, seeing everything come together, not just the technology, but the family effort that made it work. We moved the shelves a little, rolled up rugs so no one would trip, and picked out a sound system that made even quiet dialogue clear enough to catch every word. Before, I'd sometimes have to crank the volume just to hear during action scenes, only to be startled when the music swelled or someone slammed a door on screen. With the surround sound, everything settled in more naturally. Cars zipped from left to right. Rain pattered softly, as if it were really on the windows behind us, and even the softest background music seemed to come from somewhere just out of sight. It became a ritual movie night, though not just for the big-budget blockbusters. Sometimes we'd watch an old family favorite, something we knew by heart, just to see how fresh it felt on the new screen. We'd pop popcorn the old-fashioned way, on the stove, a bit of butter, the kitchen filling up with that friendly, salty smell, and drag out extra chairs on weekends when everyone stopped by. Blankets piled high, slippers off, everyone calling dibs on the middle of the couch, and as soon as the lights dimmed, the living room might as well have been part of a theater downtown. Even regular shows, the kind we used to catch only with rabbit ears and a bit of luck, felt richer with the new setup. The picture was always crisp, no more static, and even reruns seemed to sparkle. I remember watching documentaries with the grandkids, the colors of some distant rainforest pulsing off the walls, every insect and bird bright enough that for a moment the whole house felt transformed, everyone quiet except for the oohs and ahs as the scene unfolded. Setting up the Blu-ray player was a triumph in itself, a new thing to learn, but worth it as soon as we put on a movie and saw how the clarity and color put every old DVD to shame. We made a tradition of checking out sales for new releases, sometimes trading discs with neighbors the way folks used to swap paperbacks, and passing along recommendations when someone found a title that was too good to keep to themselves. Even now, some of those cases line the shelves under the TV, reminders of winter afternoons spent tucked inside, of gatherings that turned into laughter and shared memories, of the ordinary days we turned into something special just by settling in as a family. It wasn't always seamless. Sometimes the technology got ahead of us. Remotes vanished under the couch, wires slipped loose, instructions felt as long as a novel, but together, we always managed to patch things up. I learned to let the younger folks handle the trickier fixes, never too proud to pass the remote when the menus got confusing. Over time, it all became as easy and natural as flipping a light switch, no more intimidating than turning the volume dial on the old radio. Looking back, I realized that the biggest change wasn't the screen or the speakers, but how the whole thing brought people close. We may not have left the house for the big screen anymore, but with family all around and a good story playing just right, there never seemed to be anything missing. Those evenings spent with popcorn, blankets, and a bit of surround sound made our ordinary living room feel like something out of a dream. Proof that sometimes, the best nights are the ones where you stay home, let the movie run, and rest easy in the company of the people and stories you love. YouTube found its way into our home not with a bang, but as a sort of quiet helper, the kind of tool you didn't realize you needed until you'd used it enough times to wonder how you ever got by without it. It started off simply enough. Someone would bring up a funny animal clip at the dinner table, or I'd get curious about how to fix a leaky faucet and end up watching half a dozen short tutorials, all spoken by cheerful voices in spare rooms or bright kitchens not too different from mine. Soon enough, hunting for clips became a regular part of the routine, folded into the days like checking the weather or looking up a phone number. The grandkids were the first to show me all it could do. They'd hand over the tablet and type in funniest dogs or best fails of 2012, giggling at the misadventures and clever edits, sometimes pausing to show me a favorite, sometimes pushing for just one more before bedtime. We started sharing favorites, ocean rescues, singing contests, even old cartoons I hadn't seen since the days black and white was all a person could get. What made YouTube special wasn't the grandeur, but the way it offered up whatever you wanted with a quick search, a neighbor's home renovation, a local news segment you'd missed, a forgotten band playing a tiny set in a faded music hall. When the quiet hours settled in, late afternoons with chores done and sunlight spilling across the den, I'd pull up a clip, sometimes something as simple as how to fold fitted sheets so they didn't end up crumpled like old scarves in the closet. The helpfulness was always there, and if I made a mistake the first time through, I could pause, rewind, learn by watching again and again. Not only did it put answers at my fingertips, but it offered a strange kind of company, men and women from all around, sharing advice or laughing at their own blunders, turning everyday learning into an easy back and forth. Sometimes, YouTube became the bridge to distant family. A niece would post a video of her new puppy, or a cousin from 2 states over would send the link for a birthday greeting set to music. Holiday mornings were fuller for it, with clips of parades watched together even when we couldn't be in the crowd, and birthdays welcomed by families singing from living rooms and backyards far apart, but brought together on a single screen. It gave us ways to celebrate and remember, pulled together by simple links passed in quiet group chats. Not every clip was lighthearted, though. Sometimes, during slow seasons, I'd hunt up historical documentaries, forgotten interviews, or neighborhood news stories from years gone by. I'd end up watching old sporting highlights, chuckling over last-minute goals and fumbled passes, feeling the spirit of a game without ever setting foot outside. The grandkids would join in sometimes, letting the clips spark stories of my own, who I'd seen play live, how the roar of the crowd felt in the old stadium, the sort of vivid details that only come out in those half-remembered tales. For all the laughs and quick tips, what I appreciated most was how YouTube made sharing so easy. Gone were the days of swapping VHS tapes in parking lots, or hoping someone remembered to bring the photograph or newspaper clipping to church. Now, with a few taps or swipes, we all saw the same thing, laughed at the same moments, learned as much as we wanted, all on our own schedule, no special occasion needed. YouTube didn't just entertain, it brought the world a bit closer, made knowledge and joy available to anyone willing to look. I'd find myself jotting down channels I liked, making a short list for evenings when I felt like learning something new or laughing along. Sometimes, I'd lose track of time, drawn through one recommended clip to another, always finding something worthwhile or meaningful. Looking back, it's funny how those little hunts for a 5-minute video filled the gaps in days, made ordinary hours just a bit brighter, and reminded me that no matter how much the world changes, there's always a way to share, to teach, to connect, and to be surprised by how many good things are waiting just beyond a simple search. It's a simple pleasure that became a part of my mornings, often before the sun had properly risen above the rooftops. A gentle routine of settling with a cup of coffee at the corner of the kitchen table, reaching for my phone or tablet, and letting the little ping of incoming mail set the rhythm for a new day. In years past, the mail was something you fetched from the box at the end of the drive, carefully sorting envelopes and catalogs on the counter, sometimes savoring a letter or two from far-flung friends. Now, with digital life picking its way into the quiet corners of my home, the ritual moved inside, a private moment before the house came alive. I liked the way it gave me a soft transition from dreams to plans, letting news and notes trickle in while I sat with my thoughts and watched the window fill with light. The first messages were often just newsletters or store flyers, easily swiped away with a gentle flick. Then came the real notes, updates from my brother out west, a friendly hello from an old neighbor, or reminders from the doctor in church. No need to thumb through stacks of bills or advertisements on the kitchen counter. Digital mail sorted itself with calm efficiency, giving the important things their place and pushing the noise to the background. Some days, an email brought a smile, a picture of the grandchildren in their new school jackets, or a recipe from my cousin in Maine, typed out and ready to try as soon as I found the right ingredients. Sometimes, a message would jog my memory about a birthday or anniversary, prompting me to reply with a few lines, share an old photo, or promise to call when the week turned quiet. It was never about fancy words, just little touch points to keep the circle whole, keep the pulse of family and friendship steady even as time wore on. What I valued most was the way email eased my mind about errands and upcoming plans. Reminders for doctor appointments, confirmations for grocery orders, and updates from the bank. Each one a small thread in the fabric of my days, making sure nothing slipped through the cracks or snuck up unexpectedly. The technology wasn't complicated, not after the grandkids gave me a few lessons, and soon enough, I was an old hand at deleting the junk and filing the important stuff where I'd find it later. Sometimes, I'd set up a reply for later in the day, letting myself ponder the right words or cool off before answering harder notes. It gave me more control, a sense of order that always seems welcome as the world spins faster. Of course, everything had its quirks. Once in a while, a message went missing, buried under offers for discount rugs or the latest kitchen gadget. But with a bit of patience, I could find what mattered, retrieve old memories from the archives, laugh at birthday photos from a year before, and share a story or two with friends who emailed just to see what kind of tomatoes I grew that season. Sometimes, my wife joined me in the quiet, our screens glowing as we caught up on news from church or planned the week's visits with family. We'd pass back and forth updates, sometimes reminiscing, sometimes laughing about the endless parade of store promotions. That morning ritual steadied me. It kept loneliness at bay, brought new stories to the table, made a bridge between yesterday and what was to come. On holidays, email brought greetings from near and far, everyone sending photos or quick notes to keep tradition alive. It helped us plan meals, settle on time for gatherings, and find the right words when comfort was needed in hard times. Even on rushed mornings, a glance at the inbox made me feel ready, grounded, and cared for. There's a gentle truth in how technology finds its way into the daily work of living. Checking email isn't about chasing the future or losing yourself in busy schedules. It's about finding a bit of calm, a moment to take stock, a way to listen for news and keep in touch with the ones who matter. Looking back, I'm grateful for the small window of peace each morning gives me, the chance to welcome the day with a note or two, a laugh, or a prayer, all in the soft grace of a world remembered and remade, one message at a time. It's funny how grocery shopping, something I've done for decades without much change or fuss, quietly transformed when the grandkids set me up with one of those grocery list apps. I used to keep scraps of paper tucked into my wallet, notes scrawled on the backs of old receipts or envelopes, and more than once found myself standing in the aisle trying to recall if we'd run out of cinnamon or if someone had added apples to the Sunday pie. Those little scraps held memories, too. My wife's neat cursive, kids' block letters, accidental doodles from a distracted afternoon. But all the while, lists got lost or left behind, and sometimes I'd come home with everything but the one ingredient I'd needed most. When the app came along, things got simpler. I'd open my phone, tap the list, and there it was, everything I'd added during the week or received as a nudge from my wife or the kids. Milk, coffee, brown sugar for the oatmeal, and sometimes a quick note from my daughter reminding me not to forget her favorite crackers. Instead of crossing things out with a pen, I'd tap checkboxes as I went, feeling a quiet satisfaction in watching the list shrink, knowing nothing would slip through the cracks. If I thought of something midweek, bread, soap, new light bulbs, I'd add it in an instant, a routine as easy as closing the fridge after breakfast. The nicest part was how the app let us share the work. My wife could add things from home while I wandered the store aisles, and by the time I'd reach the produce section, there'd be new notes. Bananas a bit green, please, or get extra carrots for stew. On a busy evening, the kids might update the list for snacks or extra sandwich fixings, so each trip felt like a little family effort, even when everyone was scattered between errands and obligations. If I had questions, I'd send a quick text. If I wasn't sure what brand to get, I could snap a quick photo and let someone at home pick. At first, I missed the old paper lists, the little bits of handwriting or the satisfaction of a pen wiped clean from a busy day. But soon enough, I found comfort in the new method, the sense of order, the ease, the way nothing got missed or muddled in the rush of other tasks. The repeats were especially handy. Every week, staples like eggs and coffee popped up again without fuss, and I never had to rewrite the whole thing unless the meal plan called for something special. It was thoughtful, steady, and adaptable, just the way I like my routines. Sometimes, I'd strike up conversations with other shoppers about the odd sound my phone made when I checked something off, and we'd trade stories about forgotten lists or the merits of new store layouts. A neighbor once showed me her own app, full of color-coded sections for each family member, while I stuck with the basics: plain, clear, no nonsense. It made grocery shopping more social, more interactive, and less reliant on memory alone. On holidays, planning became cleaner. We'd merge lists from different households, ensuring the right potatoes and pumpkin spice made it home before the big meal. The app also sent gentle reminders, nudges when we ran low on coffee or fruit, and sometimes I'd check it just for the satisfaction of seeing a well-planned week laid out in neat rows. If I ever felt overwhelmed or pressed for time, I knew someone at home could help from their own device. It made me feel part of the family's daily workings, even when I shopped alone. And after each trip, the empty checkboxes were a small reward, proof that nothing got left behind. When I brought the bags home, there was a bit less surprise, a few more smiles, a bit more certainty that dinner would come together as planned. The technology didn't replace the pleasure I got from a good day's shopping or the small talk at checkout, but it did make each step clearer and kinder. Looking back, I see how this quiet shift made ordinary tasks just a bit gentler, showing me that even habits as old as grocery runs can be reshaped for the good, keeping my days thoughtful, practical, and always tied to the needs and voices of home. When rideshare apps first started popping up, I wasn't in any great rush to give them a try, sticking for years to my regular routines, driving myself on small errands, catching a lift with friends for church, or just letting things wait if the weather was sour and no one was headed my way. I'd hear talk about folks summoning a ride straight from their phone. No phone calls, no need to wave down a cab or linger in the cold watching for an empty car to pass. But gradually, the idea grew on me, especially when my own knees started complaining after decades of faithful driving, and I realized how a little convenience might make the days flow easier. My first rideshare trip was prompted by my daughter, who insisted on showing me the ropes before letting me go it alone. She helped install the app, entered my favorite addresses, and with a tap, simple as that, a friendly sedan was waiting out front by the time I put on my coat. I remember stepping inside, greeted by the clean interior and a soft, "good afternoon" from the driver, the kind of kindness you once expected from an old neighbor rather than a stranger. The map on my phone followed our route across town, little blue dot and all, and I felt strangely reassured knowing exactly how far we had to go. No guessing or flagging down cabs, no confusion about addresses or how much change I needed for a tip. Over time, rideshare commutes became a kind of gentle companion, offering quiet rides to medical appointments, the grocery store, or any place where parking might have been more trouble than the outing was worth. I liked how each trip began with a name and a picture, a small assurance that I was in the right car, that someone was ready to get me safely where I needed to be. No more scrambling for phone numbers or waiting on hold for a dispatcher. It was simple, modern, and quietly kind. For many folks in my circle, neighbors, family, or friends from church, it turned from a novelty into an essential tool. We traded stories the way we once did with weather or utility updates. Who picked you up last week? Did they have good music? Was the ride clean? Some drivers kept things friendly and full of chatter, asking about my plans, offering a bottle of water, while others respected the ride's peace and let me gaze out the window. Each trip felt safe. Each arrival was prompt. After a while, the routine of rating a ride, tipping through the app, or checking ahead for the driver's estimated time became as familiar as buckling a seatbelt. There were days when the weather was against me, a sudden downpour, slick roads, or heavy snow, and I'd thank the stars for not having to brave parking lots or run across icy sidewalks. Once or twice, my grandchildren used the app to send a car for me, checking the route in real time and texting to make sure I arrived. It built a bridge across the busy weeks, letting us stay close even when schedules were tangled and regular visits weren't always possible. What stood out most was how the technology brought freedom back, extended my independence past the days when driving after dark or across town seemed stressful. I no longer put off appointments or worried about heavy shopping. Help was only a couple taps away. Seeing familiar drivers from time to time, swapping small talk about baseball scores or the best shortcut to Main Street, gave the day the feel of an ongoing story, marked by brief, honest connections. Nobody rushed, nobody judged, each ride unfolding at its own unhurried pace. Sometimes, the car became a quiet place to gather my thoughts, plan the rest of my errands, or just look out as familiar streets rolled by, feeling the pulse of the town without the weight of traffic on my shoulders. One afternoon, after a good doctor's visit, I shared half an apple and a few kind words with a driver waiting for his next call. On busier days, the rides felt like a breath, a pause between shopping and supper, or between a long appointment and a warm home. Looking back, I see how rideshare commutes made living simpler and more connected, opening up the world in small, steady ways. It wasn't about losing old habits or giving up on independence, but rather about finding new ways to move, to trust, and to stay close to the pulse of daily life, however far my errands might take me. The technology was seamless, the memories warmly ordinary, gentle rides, kind faces, and the road stretching on, steady and sure, long after my own hands tired of the wheel. When I first heard the word Wi-Fi tossed around at the hardware store, I couldn't have guessed how quickly it would become the quiet lifeline running through every room in my house. Looking back now, it all seems natural. Tablets on the kitchen counter, the television streaming shows in the living room, family clustered near their own screens. each quietly tapped into the same invisible current. But I still remember the day the cable installer wound his way through the house, tools jangling, and explained how a small box no bigger than a paperback would connect me to something called a wireless network. He tucked the little device by the window, blinking lights and all, and before long the internet was no longer confined to the old desk in the office. It spread, slow and steady, into corners that had rarely seen a screen before. At first, it was a novelty. I checked the news from the breakfast table, marveling that headlines could reach me without even setting down my coffee. My wife started pulling up recipes right by the stove, the screen propped up beside the mixing bowl. The grandkids sat cross-legged in the spare bedroom, watching cartoons with the door cracked open, the Wi-Fi working clear and smooth as if the signal had always belonged in those quiet spaces. I didn't realize how much I'd come to rely on it until a thunderstorm knocked the power out one evening, and, for the first time in months, I found myself padding room to room searching for a signal, as if a lost radio broadcast might drift through the walls if I waited long enough. It wasn't just about convenience. Either, it changed how we gathered and shared. Family visits became more connected, with everyone comfortably scrolling through photos or catching up on work at the kitchen table, all without crowding into the old office chair. On sleepy afternoons, I'd sit beside the back window with the tablet and a crossword, pulling up clues or swapping emails with friends far away. Chores got easier, too. I'd send grocery lists straight from the couch, pull up a how-to video for fixing a leaky faucet, or check the weather before heading out to the garden. Where once I'd have shuffled through paper manuals or waited for someone younger to explain a new device, the answers were right there, just a tap away. Evenings took on a different sound, keyboards tapping under the same roof, television streaming softly while somebody else played music in the next room. Sometimes we'd all watch different things in different rooms, and yet somehow that felt like a new form of togetherness, a family linked by the same thread of signal and soft light. When my daughter moved back home for a while, her work followed her, not in a briefcase, but in a laptop that worked as well from the spare recliner as from the kitchen table. It made me proud to see how the house could stretch to fit everyone's needs, big or small. I did my share of troubleshooting. Every so often, the signal would grow faint at the edges of the porch or cut out in the basement, and I'd move the router to and fro, hunt for dead zones, with the help of the grandkids, and learn new bits of digital language. Download speeds and signal boosters crept into my vocabulary. The process wasn't always gentle. Cables tangled, settings got reset by accident, passwords lost on slips of paper. But like most things, the frustrations faded and the benefits lingered. The greatest comfort, though, was how Wi-Fi helped us stay bonded with folks not under our roof. Video calls with my brother out west became as easy as chatting over the fence. Babysitting meant letting the kids play games online and send photos to their parents, reassuring everyone in small ways. Doctor's appointments, once a morning lost to waiting rooms, often happened right at the kitchen table, the doctor's face pixelated but present, saving time and hassle. Holidays grew fuller with greetings from every corner, siblings sharing toasts through a screen, grandkids showing off new gifts from their own living rooms, laughter passing between households hundreds of miles apart. Now, when I move through the house and the signal stays steady, I think of all the years when talking with faraway friends meant pricey long-distance calls, waiting for letters, or betting on the mailman making it through a snowstorm. There was something honest in that old routine, but there's an ease now that feels just as right. The walls don't keep the world out. They let more of it in, gently and quietly, flavoring each day with small touches of connection and the peace of knowing that, in a world that moves ever faster, home grows wide enough to welcome every voice, every face, every bit of news worth sharing. I'd spent most of my life planning meals around handwritten grocery lists, scavenging the pantry for forgotten cans, and swapping recipes back and forth with friends over Sunday coffee. So when meal kit deliveries first started to land on our doorstep, it felt nearly fanciful. Food showing up in neat packages, measured out with quiet precision, all the ingredients folded into shiny bags, as if someone had looked through our cupboards and decided to make dinner simpler and a little more surprising. I remember how my daughter pushed me to try it, handing me a bright box full of labeled packets and a recipe card promising a stew I'd never prepared before. Opening the box was its own occasion. All the pieces were lined up, the meat, the fresh greens, sauces, and spices, and every step was written clear as day. Instead of scrabbling for a missing onion or guessing at cook times, I just laid everything out on the counter beside my old apron and let the process unfold, easy as pie. I didn't need to hunt for measurements or get lost in a half-finished recipe. One by one, each part found its place, the rhythm settling in like a well-practiced waltz. Sometimes my wife joined me, reading instructions out loud while I peeled and chopped, laughing when the herbs stuck to my fingers or the broth boiled over for a moment. What I liked best was the sense of adventure in the routine. One week held chicken curry and basmati rice, the kind of meal I'd only eaten at the diner or seen on television, and the next brought salmon in a citrus glaze or a vegetarian chili, all made easier by the tidy packets. The recipes nudged us out of old patterns, encouraging a little more curiosity, a dash of risk that never felt overwhelming. If I needed help, there were photos on the card showing each step, clear, simple, no talk of fancy techniques or expensive gadgets. Meal kits eased the burden of planning, too. Instead of worrying whether we'd forgotten the parsley or had run out of garlic, everything showed up just when we needed it, tucked inside the box like a promise that supper would come together, no surprise shortages or last-minute substitutions. On busy weeks when time ran short, the deliveries made it possible to share a hot meal without the usual rush or complaint, letting us sit and talk while water simmered and the kitchen filled with familiar, homey scents. Friends caught wind of our new habit and began to trade stories, some about meals that didn't quite turn out, others about family favorites discovered after a gentle nudge from a recipe card. Sometimes we'd send photos back and forth, a stew bubbling high in a cast-iron pot, a tray of roasted vegetables, the last piece of bread with butter melting into it. Every story held a bit of pride. Each small triumph in the kitchen felt more like an occasion, less like a chore, a reminder that even ordinary dinners could turn into something memorable. The grandkids loved picking what came next, scrolling through meal kit websites and choosing a pasta or a stir-fry for the following week. It became a ritual to open the boxes together, spread out the ingredients, and take turns reading instructions and stirring pots. Even when mistakes happened, when I salted the soup too much or missed a step, it didn't matter. Laughter and learning always stitched the evening together, and every misstep along the way reminded us that good food and good company were what counted most. I also noticed how meal kits helped us waste less, using up everything that arrived, skipping those lonely wilted vegetables or half bags of forgotten rice. The boxes made cleanup simpler, too, with just enough left for lunch the next day, all packed away in the fridge for an easy meal. Even picky eaters in the family discovered new favorites, often drawn in by the simple novelty of trying something fresh, something unexpected, with no pressure to get everything perfect. Looking back, I'm grateful for how meal kit deliveries turned dinner into a softer, easier ritual, a way to experiment, to share time, and to enjoy everyday cooking with just a bit more comfort and ease. The taste of a new dish, the warmth of a kitchen filled with laughter, and the small joy of a meal shared without hurry or worry. All these became familiar, friendly pieces of our days, turning the steady rhythm of breakfast, lunch, and supper into lasting, gentle memories. By the time I'd settled into the habit of scrolling through evening news feeds, it seemed the whole world had a way of fitting into my living room, as if all the day's events, big and small alike, could be sifted and sorted before I laid my head down for the night. Used to be, the nightly news was something you caught on television, sitting in a favorite chair after supper and listening to anchors deliver headlines with steady voices. Now, all I had to do was pick up my phone or tablet, tap a familiar app, and let stories from near and far trickle in according to the gentle pace I liked best. I'd set the brightness low, rest my legs, and scroll past headlines at my own speed. The news wasn't always earth-shaking. Sometimes it was a neighbor's lost dog found safe, sometimes stories of summer fairs or weather warning for the next county. But there was comfort in choosing which stories to pause on and which to pass by, feeling the control and soft privacy of curating my own little window on the world. I'd often linger on pieces about community events or local heroes, making a mental note to mention something to family the next day or recall an old friend's milestone. Not everything I read was pleasant, and there were evenings when the world weighed heavy on my heart. But the routine itself, sifting, absorbing, sharing if I felt moved, let me process it all gently, bit by bit. When national stories shook the headlines, the updates arrived just as swiftly. When news was light, filled with first day of school photos or firemen rescuing kittens, I'd smile knowingly, reminded that every day holds both weight and kindness. The comments sections brought bits of personality to the news. I'd read reactions and reflections, sometimes adding my own short note or just clicking a heart, a simple way to show agreement or support. Sometimes my wife would sit beside me, her screen glowing with recipes or puzzles, and I'd share a headline out loud, letting the stories knit into conversation. If a note from church made the news, or a neighbor's business announced a change, we'd talk about it, connecting the stories on screen to the lives we knew off screen. The news feeds also made it easier to keep up with faraway friends and family. Birth announcements, anniversaries, updates about health or travels, little pieces of life layered between headlines about markets and politics. For a while, I saved certain articles, archiving them for later to revisit when I had more time or when one struck a chord. Birthdays and holidays found me browsing stories for just the right message or fun fact to tuck into a greeting. When the grandkids asked questions about the world, I'd show them the news, finding age-appropriate answers and helping them understand that behind every headline lies the ordinary work of living, reacting, and hoping. What I liked most about evening news feeds was the way they let me transition from the day's business to the calm of night, providing both a sense of closure and a bridge to tomorrow. Some nights, I'd follow a storm's progress. Other times, I'd finish the day with a story about a small town's charitable event, letting gratitude and pride settle in before sleep. Technology made gathering news easier, yes, but it also made me a quieter participant in the day's flow, someone who listened, reflected, and sent out little gestures of encouragement, truth, or thanks. Looking back, I feel grateful for how this routine helped me mark time, letting me remain part of a wider world without rushing or confusion. Evening news feeds brought company to solitary hours, answers to curious thoughts, and a gentle way of wishing well to the people and places I care about most. Each story became another stitch in the quilt of days, a reminder that even as life sped up, there remains a simple, nurturing way to connect, learn, and close each day with intention and a steady heart. I still look back fondly on the moment I realized those little machines in our pockets could guide you anywhere you wanted to go, and I mean anywhere, cross-country, into tiny towns you'd never visited, around construction detours that would have left you scratching your head just a few years earlier. My first real GPS road trip started out of simple curiosity, a call from my brother about a reunion at his place halfway across the state, and instead of digging out the dog-eared map from the glove box, I just tapped his address on my phone, watched a bright blue line stretch from my driveway all the way to his front porch, and let the calm, gentle voice guide me ahead. There was comfort in those early instructions, gentle reminders to turn left in 2 miles, or keep right after the bridge, the kind of advice I used to get from neighbors when asking for directions, but now spoken with a steady calm that never apologized for repeating itself. I didn't have to worry about missing a turn or taking a wrong exit. The GPS always found a way through, rerouting if I strayed off course, kindly adjusting the plan as needed without fuss or complaint. It reminded me of those Sunday drives my father used to take, winding the family past barns and streams simply to see what we'd find, though now anyone could be a confident navigator with just a little digital help. Trip planning grew easier. Before heading out, I'd look up the best route for time of day, check traffic updates, and review small notes about construction zones or gas stations nearby, all before slipping on my seatbelt and starting the engine. The time spent lost or circling unfamiliar roads shrank down to nothing, replaced by a quiet certainty that, whatever happened, I'd make it in time for supper or manage an early arrival with room to spare. I'd call ahead, let family know when to expect me, and arrive with stories about the scenic rest stops or curious landmarks along the way. Lighthouses, roadside fruit stands, or rusted old tractors in fields gone golden in the afternoon sun. My grandkids loved it, too. On family visits, they'd help program in addresses, eager to watch the moving dot on the screen, guessing how long until we saw the river or rolled past the big white church outside town. It became a new way to bond, the car filled with their laughter and questions, and I took small pride in showing them that learning never really ends. There's always a new turn, always a new road waiting. Sometimes we'd set out without a firm plan, letting the GPS pick a scenic route or suggest a detour to see a sight or visit a quirky diner. The sense of discovery was still there, made richer by confidence and the promise of safe arrival at day's end. Even everyday errands changed. Heading to a doctor's appointment in a part of town I barely knew, or delivering a pie to a neighbor who'd moved across the county, felt breezy and manageable. The screen not only tracked location, but let me estimate how long errands would take, leaving more time for myself or for spontaneous stops, a roadside bakery, an antique shop, a quick walk in a sunny park. On holidays, those GPS directions stitched together the patchwork of visits and gatherings that made the season feel whole, everyone turning up where they were meant to be, all thanks to a companion that never tired or let you down. Occasionally, the signal faded or the system hiccuped for a stretch, and I'd have to lean on old habits, spotting the next highway sign, or asking a gas station clerk for directions. But the reassurance of GPS was always waiting, ready to bring me back on track before doubt crept in. It gave me a comfort in turning out onto country roads at dusk, recognizing that no matter how far I wandered, the way home was only ever a tap away. Looking back, I'm grateful for how GPS road trips freshened the most familiar journeys, stitched together family visits and holiday drives, and turned every outing into a small story of trust, laughter, and arrival. The gentle voice, the glowing screen, the steady blue line winding through towns and open fields, all gave shape to my travels, filling the passenger seat with certainty while leaving plenty of room for surprise, memory, and a simple joy that comes from moving forward, always heading home. As postcards began changing from paper rectangles stamped and mailed to digital images sent with a tap and a swipe, I found myself rediscovering the small thrill of sharing moments with friends and family, even when they lived too far away to drop by for supper or stop for coffee in the backyard. The first time I sent a virtual postcard, it felt almost too easy. Snap a photo of the golden maple round the corner, nudge the contrast so the leaves shone, write out a few lines about the cool breeze and the way the sky looked promising as autumn settled in, and send it off in seconds. No waiting for a post office line, no fussing over stamps, and still, the response came back quickly enough. A smiley face, a laughing reply, a memory swapped in return. For years, I cherished handwritten cards, slipped between pages or pinned to the fridge, pin marks telling of journeys or small victories, a recipe for apple pie, or an invitation to join in the season's first cookout. But the world grew busier, families moved further away. The postman was no longer on a first-name basis with everyone on the block, and I learned to meet those changes with curiosity instead of resistance. The pattern grew familiar. Snap a photo out walking in the morning, a wobbly bench on the park path with last night's rain still shining, a grandkid's grin just before biting into a caramel apple at the fair, a bright cake set out for Sunday tea. Send the picture on its way, add a kind word, and wait for the reply. What I liked best was the immediacy of these virtual postcards. No need to worry about lost mail or wet envelopes. Just small slices of life moving back and forth, often stitched together in group chats where half the family added their own images, giving updates on gardens, new pets, and first snowfalls. Sometimes the exchanges became a game, all of us racing to outdo the last photo or come up with the funniest caption. My wife would chuckle at some of the grandkids' digital stickers, a rainbow here, a pair of sunglasses there, simple edits making each card more playful and unique. Virtual postcards also gave travel a new flavor. When I visited my brother in another town, I could send back photos to friends at home, landmarks, bright murals, or quiet river scenes, sharing not just the sights but the feeling of the road beneath my feet and the wind at my back. On holidays, the family would trade photos of decorated tables, busy kitchens, and blurry gatherings brought together by technology when weather or time kept us apart. There was a gentleness to it, everyone present, even when miles made gathering tough. But it wasn't only about travel or big moments. Ordinary days, lunch in the garden, morning sunlight shining on new shoes by the back door, became a kind of living bridge between households. Sometimes the kids taught me new tricks, layering text atop an image or cropping a view so it looked just right, and even mistakes, the blurry finger across the lens or a tilted horizon, made for laughter and good stories later on. The virtual postcards let us knit together daily life, making small events into shared memories with no worry over delivery times or fading ink. Some days, the replies brought comfort, especially when worries pressed in, news of a relative in the hospital, a neighbor moving, the inevitable losses of old age and changing seasons. The photos and quick words acted as a reminder that nobody is truly alone, no matter how quiet evenings grow or how much the world shifts. Ordinary sights, a steaming cup, a fresh loaf, a cat sprawled in a sunbeam, became a shorthand for caring, for checking in, for offering more than silence. Looking back, I see how sending virtual postcards made distance less daunting, made me feel rooted not only in my own home, but in the wider circle of faces new and familiar. The technology wasn't fancy and didn't replace the joy of opening a handwritten note, but it made warmth and connection easier and more frequent, woven into the everyday pattern of our lives. Each snap and swipe turned the world into something smaller, kinder, a quilt of photos, thoughts, and gentle news stitched between friends and family near and far, always there for a cheerful greeting, a quick joke, or a quiet word when needed most. One small but steady change that came with recent years was how weather alerts stopped being a matter of waiting for radio announcements or glancing at the evening news, instead arriving with a gentle buzz or a chime on whatever device happened to be close. A sort of neighborly warning passed along at the pace of a heartbeat, no matter where you were in the house. It's a routine now, so familiar I nearly forget there were years when rain was only forecast at breakfast, storms hinted at on yellowed maps, and urgent warnings spread by telephone trees and voices rising at the edge of a church social. These days, weather alerts slip into group chats, onto social media feeds, even into emails, sometimes with detailed radar images, sometimes just a quick, clipped message, thunderstorm at noon, frost warning overnight, or heat advisory until sunset. The first time I watched a severe storm move closer in real time, rain bands bending over our county on a digital map, I realized the comfort that comes from preparation, shared not just with family under my roof, but with friends and neighbors scattered across town. Safety became collaborative, each of us glancing at the same bright patterns and sending reminders to check on elderly neighbors or bring in wandering pets. When tornado warnings crackled to life, the group threads would light up. My son sending advice to take shelter, my wife forwarding news from the school district, and neighbors chiming in about the status of the old oak on the corner, or who had room in their cellar for an extra family. Alerts arrived not only for big storms, but for quieter hazards, a slippery wind, an early snow, a muggy day that might trouble someone with breathing or the frail bones of age. The best part was the way it made caring easier, gave each of us a reason to check in, send an extra blanket or reminder before sundown. What made weather alerts powerful was not their urgency alone, but the moments of community they sparked. It's one thing to know rain is coming. It's another to hear from friends down the block, to swap plans, postpone outings, fill the fridge just in case, and share an extra meal or flashlight. Even when the forecast was less dire, the routine of checking, sharing, and reacting became its own comfort, a sign that we're all watching the same sky, hoping for the best and preparing for the rest. Weather apps spread quickly among the younger folks, though I learned to rely on them soon enough, trusting their quiet insistence as I planned errands or garden work. Often, I'd get my scoop from the family text thread, one niece sending news of hail spotted near her place, another asking for advice about covering tomatoes before a cold front. The heartfelt part was the way these warnings always came wrapped in care. Let me know if you need help. Call if power goes out. Check on the neighbors before it gets dark. Sometimes, after the worst had passed, rain battering against windows, thunder rolling through town, text alerts would turn to comfort and reassurance. A neighbor checking that the old maple hadn't fallen. Photos of rainbow light after the storm, jokes about puddles and soggy shoes. For those living alone or far from family, these digital check-ins made the wildness outside feel less lonely. Even small alerts, a windy afternoon, an early frost, became a link between homes, connecting ordinary routines with an edge of shared responsibility. Looking back, I see how weather alerts changed from distant, faceless warnings into a chorus of preparation, support, and gentle recovery. It wasn't about raising alarms, but about easing worry, helping families and streets weave tighter bonds before, during, and after any cloud drifted through. Each alert became another chance to look out for each other, to send out a sign or a word, to keep company in both the sunny spells and the heavy storms, reminding me, again and again, that no matter how quickly things change, the strongest ties are the ones built quietly and carried forward on every shared wind and weather. It's hard to imagine, now that it's grown routine, how peculiar it once felt to consult with a doctor not across a desk in a brightly lit office, but through a screen. My living room suddenly a place for health and healing, my voice joining those of nurses and specialists as naturally as it called to family over morning coffee. I remember the first telehealth visit, my daughter helping me log in, showing me where to click, how to frame my face so the doctor could see every line of worry, but also the peace of home behind me. The waiting room became a symbol on the screen, cheerful music playing as I watched for my name to appear, anticipation mixing with curiosity. It started with small things, refilling a prescription, asking about side effects, reporting a minor ache that would once have required a drive downtown and an hour spent reading old magazines in a busy lobby. The telehealth appointments arrived swiftly, my phone or tablet pinging with reminders, the consultation following a careful rhythm, confirm identity, share symptoms, hold steady while the doctor asked follow-ups. I liked the way it kept things private and unhurried. No rush in the halls, no hurried nurses shuffling charts. I spoke, listened, paused when needed, all from the comfort of my best chair or with the cat curled nearby, both of us at ease. For my wife and me, telehealth brought relief in days when mobility was a challenge. We scheduled checkups and follow-ups with no worry about parking or cold morning drives. Even specialists, once far-flung from our small town, became reachable, the appointment moving onto a screen, the doctor's face pixelated but caring as ever. I learned how to send photos of a rash, of a stubborn cough, of prescription bottles, and let the nurse guide me in using the camera, sometimes shifting the light for a clearer look. We laughed, too, at small hiccups, connecting with the wrong microphone, freezing faces, dropped signals that only lasted a moment. The technology had its bumps, but the kindness always shone through. The doctor's patient with every technical delay, no longer stifling the urge to share a timid joke or a bit of local news before getting down to business. Telehealth visits often felt gentler, more focused. The doctor could listen without interruption, guide us through exercises or check-ins, sometimes suggesting we keep a journal or upload daily readings from a gadget clipped to a finger or wrapped round an arm. The grandchildren inherited this ease, scheduling their own visits while away at school, and often sharing tips for how to make the most of a call. Take notes, have questions ready, check that prescriptions get ordered. Our family grew used to texting appointment links back and forth, logging in minutes before, and then talking about the process at supper, comparing experiences and worries. It made health a family concern, everyone invested, everyone informed. When a test or scan was needed, the app sent results straight to the phone. No waiting for a letter, no calls to the nurse, just certainty and calm. In the rare times when a hands-on check was necessary, the telehealth appointment made things easier, sometimes acting as triage, sometimes as reassurance that nothing urgent needed in-person attention. Doctors offered follow-up calls, health tips, and digital reminders for everything from vaccines to checkups, the care stretching out beyond any given appointment. The technology brought comfort to anxious days and let planning grow softer. Easy to reschedule, simple to review old notes and new recommendations. More than anything, telehealth made well-being a steady presence in daily life rather than a hassle or source of dread. It stitched together health and home, letting compassion reach through a screen and settle beside aches, worries, and celebrations. Looking back, I'm grateful for the peace it brought, how family could check in together, make the most of advice, and know that care and kindness need not be bound by distance or waiting rooms. A new kind of companionship, gentle and sure, woven into the rhythms of living well and caring for each other, one virtual appointment and honest conversation at a time. It's strange how a bit of technology wrapped around your wrist can quietly shape your days, encouraging you to move, to gauge your efforts, and, best of all, to share small victories with friends and family spread across time zones and kitchen tables. My first fitness tracker arrived as a gift from my daughter, who never tired of nudging me toward healthier habits, whether it was drinking more water, getting out for a brisk walk, or stretching before breakfast. I slipped it on with curiosity and a touch of skepticism, half expecting it to sit forgotten on the dresser before the week was out. Instead, the simple thrill of chasing step counts and green check marks quickly wove itself into my morning routine. Each day started with a gentle buzz on my wrist, an alert, a congratulation, or a reminder to get up and stretch. Instead of mindlessly walking through chores, I'd notice the steady rhythm of my steps, marveling that an ordinary stroll to the mailbox could earn a cheerful ping and a small digital trophy. The tracker counted everything: how far I'd gone, how many times I'd moved, how long I'd sat quietly, making fitness both visible and somehow friendlier than the old charts I used to keep taped to the fridge. But the true pleasure came when those numbers turned into shared challenges, inviting my son across town, my niece in another state, and the grandkids behind a cluster of screens to join me in friendly competition. We'd set goals for weekly steps, compare streaks, and send lighthearted messages whenever someone hit a milestone or needed a nudge to get moving after a busy morning. The banter was relentless. Beat you by 2 flights of stairs, or you walked farther than me during the rainstorm. The tracker let us support each other in small ways, reminding us to move on long workdays or congratulating each new best, not with lectures, but with warmth and humor. Fitness challenges sometimes grew larger. The community center hosted virtual races, encouraging us to log each walk or jog, even if most of us couldn't meet up in person. Suddenly, the act of staying healthy stretched beyond personal need and became a quiet, communal triumph, sharing pictures from morning walks, lunch break steps around the hardware store, or routes mapped through familiar neighborhoods. We traded tips for keeping trackers charged, for finding new places to wander, for rewarding ourselves at the end of a long week. Even simple chores gained new meaning. I'd compete with my wife to see who clocked more steps while gardening or vacuuming the hall. The grandchildren reveled in passing me on step counts, sending animated congratulatory stickers and gentle teasing texts. Achieving goals became less about strict discipline and more about discovering joy in movement, letting each day's progress act as proof you'd participated in life rather than simply watched it pass. On less energetic days, the tracker's reminders balanced encouragement with understanding, allowing me to rest without guilt and reset goals as needed. The record of progress, the gentle buzzes of celebration, and the occasional shared challenge were never about perfection. Instead, they became opportunities for connection, for encouraging one another quietly and steadily, even when aches and weather conspired against the usual pace. Looking back, I find gratitude in how fitness tracker challenges invited me into a daily rhythm I hadn't planned, a soft accountability, a reason to push just a bit further, and a way of joining loved ones in something positive whenever we wished. The technology wasn't flashy, but it added a layer of brightness to the smallest efforts, made healthy habits more visible, and turned each walk, stretch, and bit of housework into a gentle celebration shared by people who cared. In the end, those challenges taught me that every step has meaning, and that even the smallest victories are worth marking and sharing with the ones who walk beside us, wherever they may be. There's a certain comfort in the way Sunday afternoons feel when the light starts slipping in sideways, as if the world takes a slow breath and everything in the house falls into step with its own quiet pattern. In these moments, memory comes gently, sometimes as a sharp pang when I see my reflection in the dark window, sometimes a slow drift, trailing behind the scent of biscuits browning in the oven or the hum of a favorite old tune played on the living room speakers. As the years have stretched and routines have shifted, technology crept quietly into the corners of these Sundays, reshaping not just the structure of the day, but what it means to be at home, to connect, to let the world in and share it out again, piece by piece. The first changes seemed small: a package thawing on the counter, the refrigerator humming, my wife's gentle laughter as she tapped out a grocery order from her phone. But it was never just about convenience or saving a few steps. Each of these new habits wound around family, possibility, a life that still stretched outward even as the world sometimes seemed to shrink. The weekly shopping became smoother, less a scramble of lists and more the gentle anticipation of friends sharing recipes, grandchildren adding their favorite snacks, and the odd treat slipped in. New crackers, a special jam, remembered by someone on the other end of a digital list. In the early days, my wife and I took care to plan every meal, jotting ideas on slips of paper found in pockets, the backs of receipts, and the edges of junk mail. Now, the grocery list lives inside our phones, dynamic and tidy, pings reminding us to add eggs as we pour out the last, to pick up fresh herbs when we pass by the corner grocer. Sometimes, recipes travel through the family chat, photos snapped quickly to show a bubbling stew or a golden loaf just out of the oven. Other times, my grandchildren forward links to new dishes, and the kitchen fills with the scent of unfamiliar spices, laughter swirling as we fumble through new steps together. The shift doesn't stop at the kitchen counter. The living room, once the domain of well-thumbed books and stacks of magazines, now carries the soft glow of tablets and readers. In the hush that follows supper, I find myself curled under a blanket scrolling news from around the world, settling into stories of cities I've never walked, people I'll never meet, each headline stitched to the next with calm certainty. There's power in being able to choose what to learn, which stories to keep, which to set aside for an easier night. My wife plays gentle music nearby, sometimes jazz, sometimes the rolling comfort of hymns, the melodies spinning out from speakers the grandchildren set up during their last visit. Evenings stretch longer, softer, with fewer boundaries between us and the rest of the world. I've come to appreciate the way connection happens quietly, in a dozen small ways grown nearly invisible for their ease. Dinners are planned in group threads, holidays mapped out in cloud calendars so that no voice gets left out, no gathering lost to last-minute confusion. My daughter sends a video call request before work, my son a photo of his morning drive. The grandkids swap emojis and homework questions about the weather and how I'm feeling, all without anyone leaving their own chairs or missing the start of their favorite show. It's a patchwork of small contact, but it fills the room as surely as any crowded reunion once did. Some evenings, as dusk gathers, I slip on my walking shoes and the gentle buzz of my fitness tracker reminds me it's time to move. What once was just a stroll around the block is now part of a quiet contest. Steps counted, goals set, the silent encouragement of family marching alongside me step for virtual step. My brother sends a message when he passes his goal, my granddaughter shares a snapshot from her own evening loop, and the conversation flows as if we were sharing the sidewalk even when cities or states stand between us. The tracker gently records my stride, my heartbeat, offering small badges and reminders to rest, to drink water, to stretch beyond the ordinary. Fitness isn't just about the solitary moments, though. It's woven into routine. Even simple chores, the work of pulling weeds or stacking firewood, become gentle achievements celebrated by those I love, all of us tracking progress and shared challenges that mean more for the company they keep than for any leaderboard. Lazy days aren't a failure anymore, just a pause to be balanced by tomorrow's promise. And every Sunday night brings a cluster of animated congratulations, a series of digital high fives echoing laughter at the dinner table. Across the seasons, technology plays a role, subtle but steady. The drone of the washing machine now comes with an app that pings when a load is done. My phone lights up with reminders about prescription refills, yard work alerts, gentle prompts that freshen memory as the list of to-dos grows and shifts. It keeps me honest and unhurried. I know I can always look to see what day the trash bins are due, what time the pharmacist closes, when to set bread to rise. There's a broader reach, too. Moments when I need advice or company, a medical question that lingers, or an ache that rises in the deep of winter. With telehealth, appointments happen in my favorite chair, the camera capturing more than just the state of my joints or the clarity of my eyes. It brings a sense of dignity and relief, a reminder that care and comfort aren't bound by waiting rooms or the hassle of travel. The doctors greet me by name, remember details, answer questions with patience. We chuckle over missed connections, adapt easily when the Wi-Fi falters, trust that small setbacks are nothing next to the reassurance found in conversation, routine checks, the follow-up call that arrives just after supper. The home itself adapts and expands. Wi-Fi reaches into every corner, letting the smallest smartphone or the oldest laptop participate in family quizzes, movie streaming, and recipe sharing. The kitchen is as much a gathering place for digital recipes and video lessons as for the aroma of baking bread. Devices multiply: a tablet for reading, a speaker for music, an old phone passed to the youngest grandchild for playing games just within earshot. Meal kits arrive, sometimes as a treat, sometimes as a necessity on busy weeks. They bring not just food, but a sense of occasion, a pause in routine, the novelty of trying something new, turning an ordinary Thursday into an adventure with smoked paprika and fresh parsley. The whole family hovers around the instructions, enjoys the results, debates what to keep for next time. Leftovers are portioned for lunch, and the recipe cards slip into a drawer alongside old clippings and handwritten notes from years and years of Sunday suppers. Weather once arrived in TV forecasts and newspaper margins. Now it's a notification chiming in real time, a neighbor's text warning that hail's on its way, a storm tracker linking distant relatives and old classmates in a shared task of battening down, checking in, watching the sky together no matter where we find ourselves. When the wind knocks out the power, it's the digital crowd that rallies first. Who needs candles? Who has extra soup? Is anyone stranded or in need of a hand? The old telephone tree is digitized, but the care is just as personal. Road trips are planned without a single map unfolded on the hood of the car. Everyone adds suggestions for stops and scenic routes, the GPS reliably guiding us past detours and back roads, and sharing estimated times of arrival so a hot meal waits at the next stop. Family joins by caravan and halfway points are negotiated by shared pins and location bubbles. Every stranger's driveway suddenly a landmark, every lake or field a conversation point. Sunsets are photographed, sent back to those waiting at home with a note. Almost there, wish you were with us. The words as tender as the journeys they carry. Virtual postcards have replaced so many of the old ones, but the intention remains. Photos sent in real time. Morning frost, a robin's egg in the hedge, hands sticky with dough in the middle of a family bake. Travel further, faster, reaching friends and distant cousins, sparking replies that come before the flour has even been dusted from the counter. The fridge still holds a few paper cards, but the phone brims with small joys, silent reminders that even the ordinary can sparkle when shared. As the sun slides low, the world contracts until only a cluster of gentle lights remain, screens behind closed curtains, voices raised in laughter over a group call, messages quietly marked as read with a tap and a sigh of contentment. The evening news, once the anchor of supper, now arrives in curated feeds, letting me move at my own pace, pausing on stories that matter most or skipping what can wait. Conversation happens side by side, each of us holding our own device but crossing the digital divide to trade jokes, thoughtful observations, or simply the warmth of company. The world may have changed, growing louder, faster, and more uncertain, but there's reassurance in how familiar the core of life remains, how technology serves the basics: caring, connecting, planning, remembering. Even when voices fade, when someone moves away, when loss leaves a quiet space at the table, the thread of communication continues, stretching gently to fill what's missing with memory, hope, and new plans for tomorrow's breakfast, tomorrow's walk, tomorrow's call. Lying in bed at day's end, I hear the soft ping of a late message, a photo of a sleeping pet, a grandchild's question about tomorrow's weather, a reminder to get some rest. I set the phone aside, let myself smile at how, for all the distance and change, the essentials endure. It's not the glow of the screen that matters, nor the digital record of steps, meals, or chats. It's the people those messages carry, the intention behind each note, the comfort of knowing that in every season, no matter how the days twist or stretch, I'm still surrounded by warmth, by presence, by the simple gifts of living in concert with those I love. And as sleep draws near, I'm grateful for the biscuits risen golden on the counter, the walks finished and tracked, the blurry snapshots, the storm alerts, the enduring ritual of sitting with my wife, reading news, planning meals, sharing silence. For every flicker of technology that lightens load or deepens connection, for every small gesture both new and familiar. For, in the story that is my life, each of these threads, each message and gentle advancement, has helped me stitch the days together, comforting and clear, right up to this gentle, unhurried close. Every life is a collection of rituals, some we notice, some we only realize in their absence. The first cup of morning coffee on a chilly day. The hush of the house before anyone's spoken, when the only sound is the shift of branches outside the window, the faint hum of the fridge. Somewhere in the middle of it all, I found myself marking time by new tools, old habits tangled with fresh inventions, discovering comfort and surprise in places I hadn't meant to look. Technology did not arrive in my home like an avalanche. It drifted in, quiet as dust motes in a late sunbeam, making itself useful until, one day, it was as ordinary as the rain or the mailman's dog. What I remember now isn't the grand moments, but the soft accumulation of changes. Grocery days used to mean rummaging for change, lists written on old receipts, forgetting the spices I needed, and coming home with a little too much of whatever caught my eye. Now, each week begins with a digital list, swiftly shared in the group chat. The grandkids adding requests for their favorite cereal by tapping a message when they think I'm not looking, my wife updating a note while she sits across the room, reading the paper on her tablet. Our shopping is no less an event, but it is an event of coordination now. Our voices and reminders moving back and forth in text and emoji, a blend of teasing and practicality. I drive to the store less often than I did, since delivery has become so easy. The order arrives at the door, brown bags ruffled open, volunteers in neon vests flashing short hellos from the curb. There is more conversation than there used to be. Phone calls to sort out substitutions, pleasant apologies for missing items, a wave through the window from a driver who knows the route well. We joke about the weather, share the latest news. More often than not, I watch the order arrive on a neat little map, my phone pinging as the truck rolls down the last hill, giving me time to put the kettle on before everything's unpacked. In the kitchen, the recipes have changed a bit too. Some come from clippings saved in a biscuit tin, curling at the edges, spattered by decades of enthusiastic sauce. The new ones arrive in photos. My niece's pie, golden and proud. A neighbor's winter stew, ladled out in a bright ceramic bowl. The sort of quick, clever video that somehow makes even the most elaborate dish seem possible. There's no more quiet anxiety over lost cards or cryptic handwriting from my mother's careful script. The instructions are right there, pausable, rewindable, sent with a note for good luck and love. Mealtimes still gather us around the table, though sometimes the faces are on screens instead of across the wood. We pass dishes hand to hand when we're together. We pass recipes and bon appetit over video otherwise. Even on ordinary afternoons, my wife and I read together from our separate chairs, swapping tidbits and laughs, tablets balancing on our knees. She likes news from the coasts, city stories full of bustle. I prefer slower tales, old trivia, farm reports, the kind of columns that wander as they please. It's companionable. There is time to talk, to remember, to plan the next meal or outing. Beyond the kitchen, the day's pace is marked by a chorus of digital whispers. A soft buzz to check the back door, an alert that rain's moving closer, a colored blob crawling across a radar map, a string of town names highlighted for caution. The grandkids send jokes about the weather, memes about the dog, the odd question for advice, when to plant, how to cook sweet corn, whether an old photo is of their father or their uncle. Each message is a thread in a net that stretches across time and place. I answer from the sun porch or the garden, sometimes with photos of my own, sometimes with just a word or two and a hope for their day. My own health, once something managed by waiting rooms and shredded magazines, comes more easily now. Telehealth appointments happen in my own bedroom or at the kitchen table, the doctor's cheerful and practical, unhurried by the tangle of in-person schedules. I tell my wife it's a blessing. We no longer lose half the morning to a bus or a drive, no longer worry about icy sidewalks or crowded lobbies. Prescriptions arrive by mail, pills sorted into neat packets, each with a date and time. Even the pharmacist checks in with a link to a portal, reminding me about blood pressure or wishing me a gentle weekend. If I feel like moving, there are more invitations than I know what to do with. My fitness tracker lights up with encouragement. My son's notes about besting his own running streak. My neighbor's proud photo of a new trail. My daughter's encouragement to reach for a few more steps before sunset. Sometimes I join in proper challenges, comparing patterns on the screen, laughing at my own stubbornness as I circle the house just to hit a number. Other days, I let the technology tick along in the background, a quiet record of all the movement that living brings, sweeping the porch, walking for the mail, chasing the cat away from the seedlings. The old rituals remain, dressed up in new colors. Holidays aren't limited to whoever can travel. Celebrations bloom on video calls, tables set for company on both sides of a glass screen. We sing together, slightly out of sync, voices echoing in the small rectangles of family calls. There's always news, a child's missing tooth, a new job, a surprise engagement. The world is smaller than ever, and sweeter for how quickly we gather in. Sometimes I scroll back through saved photos, a living record of the slow unfolding of ordinary days and the milestones pieced together across miles. Evenings come with choices, some new, some older than my recollection. The news, once only at 6 or 11, only in the voice of a trusted anchor, now comes as I want it, selected headline by headline, digging deeper, skipping what feels too heavy. The TV flickers with shows picked from carefully tended lists, half-finished dramas, nostalgic comedies, documentaries about places that used to feel impossibly far. On quiet nights, I'm as likely to end up on YouTube as anywhere. A clip of an old singer, instructions for sharpening garden shears, a rambling conversation about music or bread baking. The algorithm has come to know me, at least a little, suggesting small treasures I would never have found alone. Sometimes, I realize how seamlessly the house has adapted. The network reaches into every room, nudging the heat, turning lights on at dusk, playing soft music in the spaces between plans and chores. It's a quiet presence, steady and reassuring, as impossible to imagine living without as running water or hot tea. It's not about being modern or clever, but about making life easier, gentler, more possible for everyone who comes through the door. In the midst of it all, the strongest moments still come from people. The group text thread that lights up when a storm blows in, sharing warnings and check-ins, then stray jokes and old photos until the wind calms. The quick video message from the little ones, covered in mud, holding up a lopsided cake, dancing across the living room rug. My brother's late-night notes telling a story too good to keep or a memory that needed an audience. Even silent presence is easier now. My wife curled next to me, swiping quietly through apps and images, her smile flickering alongside the screen's soft glow. What hasn't changed is the comfort of ritual, the knowledge that no matter how the days are measured, there will be bread and coffee in the morning, laughter by supper, stories before sleep. There will be times to worry, to mourn, to reach out for help, but also times to rest and savor and claim another patch of quiet, ordinary happiness. The tools are always changing. What once was a telephone is now a pocket computer. Neighbors wave from windows and send texts from the kitchen. Grandchildren visit in frames of color and light, far off but unmissable. Night falls and I listen for the hush that means everyone is settled, that the house has closed another gentle cycle. My phone lies charging on the nightstand, filled with small reminders and big memories, with each alert and message a thread tying me to the next day's hopes and tasks. I rest, content in the knowledge that, for all the world's speed, for all the things invented and retired, what matters is how we use each new stitch and gizmo, whether it helps us remember, whether it brings us closer, whether it lets us pause and notice the quiet treasures scattered in our own ordinary days. I wouldn't trade the ease, the connection, or the company that's followed. I wouldn't turn away the invisible gifts that put a bit more sunlight in a morning or a little more peace at bedtime. I only hope, each day, to keep learning, to stay open, to make my own rituals, a click, a call, a message, a shared meal, into small, lasting proof that living well will always find a way.